Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 94 of Through the Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. My name is Trevor Dame. The other voice you will hear, as always, is Matt Feuerstein. Matt, this is a rare Friday night recording for us, and we changed things up a little bit, and everything goes to hell. I lose my paid writing gig because the great people at Fan Fight have announced that they're sadly closing up the wrestling ring wing of the site in a month. Vince McMahon retires. Apparently, my microphone's having a little bit of problems, although you are confident that will all be worked out in level later. Matt, we can never record on a Friday again. This is the world's on fire. Sure, truly, this is the worst week in the history of Through the Years.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear about Fan Fight and your writing gig, but yeah, it was a great site, and your columns were great, and I know that you will you'll land some other place, but I've definitely mourned the loss of that site, and that's all I have to say about everything you just said.
Yeah, obviously, Lord knows there's enough talk about Vince McMahon, including
I don't even know who that is.
Yeah, so you know what? We are going to be what Through the Years is great at being, which is an escape from all of that. So, as always, we have 3 feeds. You found one of them. So either the Pro Wrestling Only feed, the feed that's just us, ThROH, on any podcast app for spelling through, or YouTube, where we get our nicest comments, are always on YouTube. We always get, it seems like every episode now we get one unbelievably nice comment that just is humbling. And so those are the 3 ways to listen, and let's get right to the show. The show we are covering today is Ring of Honor's 4th anniversary show. It took place February 25th, 2006 in Edison, New Jersey at the Inman Sports Club in front of a reported crowd of 850 fans. The Observer would mention about this, the 850 fans is very close to the same crowd they drew for Kenta and Marufuji the last time in the building. So that's a pretty big win in the sense that you're drawing basically the same crowd with it's a good card, but it's not we're flying in big outside stars to make their debuts big. So,
but it felt like just ROH was getting hot at this point. I think the CZW thing had a lot to do with it, but they were going to have a run of pretty good crowds over the next few shows, and I think this is just the beginning, maybe not even the beginning, but this is during a pretty hot period for them.
Yeah, and that's a great point that I was thinking about making at the end of the show, but it's a good time to talk about. When I was watching this show, and maybe this is tipping my hat, but I really got this feeling like when you watch a wrestling product week in and week out, or I guess for us it's show in, show out, every 3 weeks in, every 2 weeks out, there are times when a wrestling company's kind of on its way down or when it's kind of maintaining a level. And there's nothing more fun than when you're watching a wrestling company and you get the feeling that it's heating up.
Especially when it's heating up based on things that you like. You know what I mean? Sometimes things heat up in ways that are not really suited to your own personal tastes.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like watching the show, I got that feeling I've gotten a couple times Through the Years where it's it's just on this show I feel it's heating up, I could feel more of an energy from the crowd, obviously with this, this attendance to see like you were just mentioning that's filtering through to the fans, and just so many things are starting off or really progressing well, where there's been a lot of Through the Years. I think we've only had a couple times where things have kind of dipped in momentum a little bit, maybe late 2003, early 2004, maybe the few shows between when Punk left and before Danielson became champ. But this is one of those times where it feels like watching this show, I got this real nice feeling of, we're getting into a really good period now.
Yeah, and I expect that to be borne out by the shows that we're going to watch. This is the beginning of the Milestone series.
Yeah, and that's literally my next show. You are one step ahead of me today because on the Milestone series, we should talk about that. So for people that don't know, because this is a thing you won't really know if you don't own the physical DVDs. Although I guess there's a little graphic on the screen.
Yeah. They make note of it on the DVD itself.
Basically, the Milestone series was Ring of Honor saying we have this big run of 6 or 7 historically significant shows to us, so we're going to label them as the milestone series. And the big selling point was if you bought the DVDs, they had on the spine, like if you put all those DVDs together in order on your shelf, they would spell out the Ring of Honor logo and milestone series and look really nice. So it was a nice little collector's bonus if you bought every show in the milestone series. And it must have been a big success for them because, well, one, these shows were really finally remembered, but two, they tried to repeat it the next year with that fifth year festival where they did the same kind of branding and the logos on the spines of the DVDs would spell out something. And I assume it didn't work out quite as well that time because they never did it again, I don't think, at least in my memory, but...
Yeah, I'm a fan of the concept, though. I think it definitely worked out for the first one. We'll see if it works out for the second one. But, I like the idea. Like, this is a special run of shows, and they try to do the best they can to make each one special, and they do a little to be continued. We'll see at the end of each of the DVDs to try to create a thread from one show to the next, which is not something they typically do on ROH DVDs. So I thought it was a cute concept, and I think it worked out.
The only thing I want to ask you, because there must be something I'm forgetting because my memory is really bad, but I guess it's just in there because it's in the streak, and otherwise it would break up the streak of shows in the milestone series. But I can think of a reason for every show in this series is a milestone except for one. So this show starts it off. 4th anniversary show, obviously, that's a milestone. Next show is Arena Warfare. That's Ring of Honor's first show ever in ECW Arena. So you can say, okay, that's a milestone. Then we skip one show, which I'll get to in a second, and we get Ring of Honor's first ever triple shot, which ended up being some of the biggest shows they ever run. Those are milestones. And then you get the 100th show, which ends the milestone series. But Best in the World, which is just the Ring of Honor show they run in New York, like, is there something I'm forgetting that was, like, special about that show, or does that just happen to be in the middle, and it's like, we're not going to break up the series for one show?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like the what you said, like it's in the middle, but they could stretch it to make it make sense.
Yeah.
That it's a big show in New York, and Kenta and Marufuji are wrestling against Bryan Danielson and Samoa Joe. Like, they're like literally the best in the world against the best in the world. So I think that's basically it. But you're right, it's not as obvious a milestone as the rest of the events. Maybe as we get closer, we'll get to read some of what Gabe wrote, and maybe he has a better explanation of what makes that a milestone that we're forgetting. But I think that's pretty much it. It's just, it fits in with the rest of it, and you can stretch the meaning of the term milestone to fit.
Yeah. Matt, every day I'm alive is a milestone. But
you and me both, brother.
So the torch reminded me of this, reading the news that happened between the last show and this one. Not much really happened to cover, but I thought that this was a blast from the past. Do you remember this, Matt? The torch writes, Ring of Honor ran an angle last week where Chris Hero shut down the Ring of Honor message board and directed people to visit CZW's message board. Do you remember that classic little piece of business where they temporarily, very briefly shut down the Ring of Honor message board? Chris Hero was like, ha, I've shut it down to go to CZW fans.
No, until you just said that like a second ago, I had totally forgotten that. But now I do remember that. Yes.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny though, because CZW fans was like it was a CZW website, but it felt like more of like a catch-all, like indie fans website.
Yeah. And I feel like at least the times I visited CZW fans, which might have been a bit later, like there was a lot more open criticism of CZW there than like you would expect from a promotional affiliated message board. But
it felt more independent than the ROH message board did, for sure. Like, it didn't feel like it was just a bunch of people. Not that like the ROH message board didn't have any criticism of ROH, but and not that it felt like it was like super hyper moderated, but it felt like the people in the ROH message board were like on Team ROH, whereas the CZW message board felt like it was like fans of indie wrestling just being themselves.
Yeah, we are so dated though, because can you imagine like if someone like a younger fan listens to the show a few years from now, will they even know what a message board is? Like, those are really dying out, sadly. Like, the idea where I think, we've talked about in the past how important the Ring of Honor message board was to Ring of Honor at times. Like, the idea of a major angle being a heel being like, haha, you'll have to go to a different message board. Like, fans these days would be like, why don't you just go on Twitter? But
yeah, I mean, would Discord be the modern version of a message board, kind of?
probably. It's not quite the same, but
Yeah.
I think that's the best analog. Definitely better than Twitter or Facebook or like a messaging app. I think that's definitely the closest, even though it's not quite like it's harder to revisit old conversations on Discord. It's still much more like a chat, but it's the closest we have, other than the few message boards that are still kind of.
Yeah, I was going to ask. You were like the king of the Figure 4 Wrestling Observer message board. Does that still exist?
Yes, it does. I don't post there, but it still exists.
Is it active? Is it active? Like, do people post on it?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's probably seen better days, but it's still active. And I think there's still like even a Death Valley Driver message board. I don't know how active that is, but again, that was another place that was like kind of the lifeblood in some ways of indie wrestling during this era. The major wrestlers that Tony Khan posted there.
Pro Wrestling Only still around.
Yeah. Exactly.
ROH Forum still around. Is Wrestling Classic still around?
I mean, at least the archives are, because I think like a year ago I had to look up some stuff there. I have no idea how active it is. But,
remember the other arena?
I do. They used to have like a crazy, like their own kind of like wrestling simulation game. Like that was an extensive site.
Well, that was a crazy message board because it had John Williams, who was just like one of the early like anti-Meltzer people, and he used to criticize it because they were like friends that had a falling out. Oh man, this is bringing me back.
Oh God, this is okay. Too much nostalgia. This is incredible. John Williams, man, taking me back. But anyway, we're kind of dating ourselves here.
Kind of. Literally, the whole point of the podcast is that we're dating ourselves, which is good because no one else will date us. So,
this whole show really is just living in the safe, warm blanket of nostalgia. But continuing that on, another note from the Pro Wrestling Torch about this show, and that unfortunately we have reached a point where the Wayback Machine just has not archived anything for like a good month and a half. And so I can't find any old lineups or a lot of the news that isn't in newsletters, which I can dig up. And so I don't know what his original match was, but the Pro Wrestling Torch wrote, according to Ring of Honor officials, Chris Sabin was forced to pull off the 4th anniversary show on February 25th due to a strained ankle and a transportation issue. So it would be funny if those were tied together, like he was planning on getting there on bicycle or something. But but anyway, I don't know what his match would have been. It's interesting. I was trying, I just in my mind, I was trying to think, well, where would he fit on this card if, he had worked here? Because this seems like a pretty complete card, at least in the top half, that was all kind of set in stone. But clearly he had a match here, but had to pull off. And one last live note before we get to the show. Greg Chornomaz, apologies if I mangled your name there, sir, if you're listening. He gave a live report to the Pro Wrestling Torch at the time, and we'll have, I think, a couple notes from him. And he noted this did not make the DVD, but the show opened with a 10-bell salute to Johnny Grunch, who had just passed away at this time. And so kind of, again, takes you back to the time and the place we were. And obviously, Johnny Grunge had a big influence on independent wrestling in the sense of one of the big indie wrestling tournaments ever is the TPI. That's did I just mix up Johnny Grunge and Rocco Rock?
I mean, yes. Also, the TPI's been around was around a lot longer than this.
Yeah. I mixed them up.
But it's still worth talking that one of the biggest wrestling tournaments of the era was the TPI. That was a big deal tournament, and it was in honor of the tag team partner of Johnny Grunge.
That's a nice attempt at a save for me, Matt. But
yes.
No, I screwed up here. But no. Obviously, Ted Petty had a much different, larger, I think, influence on independent wrestling when he was the Cheetah Kid and stuff like that. And by doing this, I'm now negging Johnny Grunge. So this is becoming a Lance Storm level tribute to Johnny Grunge.
And now you're negging Lance Storm.
You know what? Let's just move on to positive things. Let's move on to the dark matches that we did not get to see because they did not make DVD, but once kind of historically significant in a little bit of a way. The first match would be Handsome Johnny defeating Pele Primo. Matt, do you know who Handsome Johnny turned out to be in the future?
Now I need to know, because I do not.
That he would end up becoming Hanson, and who would later become Ivar.
Oh, so, all right. He is pretty handsome.
So he would become a Ring of Honor regular years after this. So it's kind of crazy. It kind of shocked me to see him show up here this early, because he doesn't become a real fixture in Ring of Honor for quite a long time yet. But then we have Derek Dempsey and Rhett Titus defeating Jason King and Smash Bradley. And at this point in the show, Matt, an angle happened for the CZW feud. That's how hot the CZW feud was, is they were shooting angles that did not even make the DVD. Dave wrote in The Observer, the show featured more of the Ring of Honor versus CZW feud. It started uniquely as Chad Shaft, a well-known CZW front row fan who has been involved in angles with the promotion before, was at the Ring of Honor show heckling a students match with Derek Dempsey and Rick Titus, he says. It's Rhett Titus, Dave, versus Smash Bradley and Jason King. This led to the wrestlers going out of the ring into the stands to jump Shaft. Shaft was thrown out of the building by the students, security, and Gabe Sapolsky.
Shut your mouth.
I'm just talking about Shaft, man.
Yeah, true.
But, yeah, this did not make DVD, but, you know, it's kind of crazy that they were even, like, just like Gabe's coming out for a pre-show angle to help throw a fan out. Like, you know, they were trying to do different things to make this feel more real.
Yeah, it sets the mood, I suppose.
And then the final dark match that we did not get to see, BJ Whitmer pulled double duty on the show, maybe because they knew he was going to work a pretty short match on the main card. BJ Whitmer defeated Shane Hagedorn, and Shane, if you're listening, he just welcomed another child into the world.
Congratulations,
Shane. Yes. And you have twice as many kids. Well, you have way more kids than Matt and I, because we have 0 combined. So I don't know how you do a weekly podcast with one child, let alone now 2.
And now you're negging us. Great.
Matt, you can just call me -1. But anyway, we open with Jim Cornette in a room full of VHS tapes and DVDs. I assume this is like his home office or something, because I think this is back in, you know, his home in Kentucky. Cornette talks about this being the 4th anniversary of Ring of Honor. He apologizes for not being there in person, as he still has some business in Louisville that he had to attend to. Cornette says he'll be getting live reports from the show via phone, and he'll make some rulings later on in the night. Kind of weird that he was like, I'll make some rulings later in the night, like he's anticipating that things are going to go wrong.
Yeah.
Very, very pessimistic, Jim.
Yeah, it's funny at this point, like, I apologize for not being there, even though I'm almost never there.
Yeah, and especially like I'm reading ahead on the research for these shows, and like it feels like Cornette got cursed because he wasn't that old at this point, but we're getting close to the time where like Cornette suffers a legitimate knee injury and has to get surgery like within a few shows. Like it seems, and between this and him having the hip injury that caused him to miss shows and losing a tooth, like basically the moment Jim signed with Ring of Honor, horrible things started happening to him in like a Final Destination type like curse on him. But
yeah, no, I mean it's kind of true. Like this run was kind of cursed for Jim Cornette.
But what wasn't cursed, Matt, was our opener on the show proper, a 3-way tag team match. The Briscoes of Jay and Mark Briscoe defeated Jason Blade and Kid McCausey, and also Sal Renaro and Tony Mamaluke in 6 minutes, 46 seconds, when Mark Briscoe pinned Blade after he and Jay hit a simultaneous top rope leg drop and cutthroat driver. And so before this match starts, what sets it up was this was supposed to just be Blade and McCausey versus Renaro and Mamaluke. But before the match could even start, Give Me Back My Bullets plays over the PA. The Briscoes return, bulked up. Jay's now in shorts rather than a singlet. Jay grabs the mic, and after a huge welcome back chant, says it feels good to be back, and they're here to prove that they're the best tag team in the world. He proposes it starts right here, right now, and how about they make it a 3-way dance, which they do.
This is one of those deals where, like, I guess because there's no commissioner, like the wrestlers just say this is going to be what happens, and they just do it. Which it'd be funny if real sports worked that way.
When Cornette's away, the mice will play. Matt, this was, you know, I fondly remember the return of the Briscoes, and I remember, like, did you get the same vibe as I did? Like, at the time, I remember seeing like the Briscoes come back and being like, it's a weird thing you don't get to see often in wrestling, where it was almost like it's a rare thing where it almost had a similar vibe as like when someone goes off to college and comes back, where it's like, wow, these guys left as boys and now they're men. Like, they're definitely bigger, bulkier, more grown up looking. And it was kind of, and they did wrestle a little bit more aggressive, I would say, starting now. It definitely is a kind of an interesting thing to see, have that kind of gap. And then they kind of literally just physically mature when they're back.
Yeah, because they were so young. So of course they're growing up, and they're much bigger guys, and they wrestled a much more powerful style. And if you look, they only wrestled, at least like on record, a few times between when they left ROH in the summer of 04 and here in the winter of 06. They, you only have like a handful of matches with them. So it's not like they like did extensive, like they did a big tour of Europe or Japan, which some guys do, and they come back and they're so much better. But they just did a little bit, and I guess otherwise they must have just done training at home, in their in Delaware. But they came back and they were already great, but they just seemed that much more great. Their presence was better. Already, they're not like they were good on the mic yet, but they were already much better on the mic, I would say. Like, just in terms of really just Jay had the mic, and all he said was it's good to be back and stuff. But he still had a lot more confidence than he had in the promos that they would cut back in the original ROH run. I guess just being older gave them more confidence in general. But yeah, this match it might have been actually slightly longer than it needed to be, in the sense that the Briscoes came out, they did some big moves, and they really impressed. And then they had a segment where Blade and Makazi worked with Renaro and Mamaluke a little bit, and nobody cared about that. And it was just kind of like, not like it was so bad, but like it was just people weren't interested. And then the Briscoes came back in and did a bunch of big moves again, and everyone got excited again. And all the stuff that the Briscoes did was great and exciting and kind of explosive. And they did some of their classic big moves. Mark did the shooting star press to the outside. They did double boots in the corner. They also did a spike J driller. Oh no, that actually came later. It was a combination of a cutthroat driver leg drop, which was, I think, new. And they won the match with that. And everything with the Briscoes was good. I feel like you could have cut out almost everything that didn't involve them, and it would have been fine. But in the end, this was still a memorable return. And live, it was amazing. Like, it was just because I was here again for the show. And just, everyone was waiting for the Briscoes return, and they didn't announce what the Briscoes were going to do. And so it was, it was great that they got it out of the way early. I think it was a really good way to prime the crowd and get them excited for the night. And it was a great moment.
Yeah, and of course the Briscoes would end up being kind of like this through line throughout the show, because we would see them multiple times, two more times throughout the night, in the middle of the show and at the end.
Yeah, they made sure that on the Briscoes' return, they were going to make clear, like, these they're going to be major players immediately.
Yeah. I completely agree. I'm glad you said what you did about the match, because I almost thought it was a little bit crazy, because it's not often you say, oh, this 6-minute match felt too long. Like, I really enjoyed this, but just like you said, this match, it's like a Briscoe sandwich where, although I guess the Briscoes aren't the filling, they're the bread, but I guess it's more like a Kid Makazi, Jason Blade, and Renaro and Mamaluke sandwich.
It's one of those sandwiches where the bun is the best part.
Exactly. I've had a few of those. But yeah, the Briscoes just have this unbelievably hot start where they're just hitting big moves and killing everybody. And at the end, obviously, they're hitting big moves and winning the match. And then the middle of the match it does feel like it's one of those independent wrestling things where it's like, you're not paying these guys money. No one has guaranteed contracts. So the best you can give is like, everyone's going to get a little bit of time to shine. So basically, the middle of this match, which really feels like it should just be a great Briscoe squash, which it kind of is on the edges. It's like, okay, we're going to let you guys have like a 2-minute mini match in the middle of this. And like you said, the crowd, they just want to see the Briscoes kick ass like they saw to start with. And it's not, like you said, it's not bad in the middle. It's just, it feels kind of ham-handedly kind of wedged in there just to give those guys a shot to do some stuff rather than just sell for the Briscoes. But still, I thought a really great return. The fans ate it up. Just seeing the Briscoes the way they were at this point was great. They looked like $1 million. But a few notes around this match. First thing I want to mention, Matt, is on our last show, I read a news note about how Kerry Silken had apparently invested in new lighting and sound equipment. I asked you on the show, Matt, does it look like to you that there's new lighting and sound equipment? And you and I both agreed, not really. And then before I'd even started watching the show, when you started watching it, you sent me a message and saying, and actually on this show, it looks like there's new lighting. And I tuned in. I was like, God damn it, Matt's right. Like, so we just jumped the gun on that one because it definitely does look like the lighting.
And the cameras, like, yeah, it looks crisper.
Yeah, so definitely the investment seems to come in at the start of another part of the Milestone series as they upgraded the equipment. Another thing, Matt, did you notice that on a recent show we talked about Sal Rinauro slipped on the little mini ramp coming into the ring, making his entrance?
Yep.
You notice he almost did it again on this entrance? And
I did not. Oh, no.
I don't know if he was actually joking to a fan about it or if he really slipped, but like he almost falls on his ass again.
I'm going to go back and watch that. I did not catch that.
Couple other quick notes. The tag rope comes off in Mark Briscoe's hand. Matt, we are famous on the show for doing counts of things, particularly the man-on-woman violence streak, which has long since ended, thankfully. But if I had known this was going to become a trend, a few shows ago, I would have started like counting how many times the newly installed Ring of Honor tag ropes come off in a wrestler's hand, because I feel like we are at least 3 already.
Well, we can start counting now.
Well, again, I think we are at least at 3. And then last note from the match itself, at one point Sal does a 21 count vertical suplex on Kid Makazi, and this will start a trend on this night where there is at least 4 or 5 delayed vertical suplex spots on the show, to the point where when it happens like near the end of the night, Dave Prazak even calls it out like this is the night of the delayed vertical suplex. So it all starts here in the opener. But
I wonder if it like is a total coincidence and no one watched each other's matches, or if by the end it was like, all right, we're just going to do this because everyone else did and it's funny. Like I do wonder that if like in the main event they knew that a lot of people had done it.
It's funny because CM Punk and Samoa Joe, in their Ring of Honor shoot interview when Punk was still with the company, one of the things they kind of talked about that they took pride in was kind of making sure wrestlers did not repeat spots on a given show. But this is one of those shows where you really, occasionally you can really notice the impact of a promotion not having like a proper road agent who is kind of making sure everything like doesn't repeat itself, where, yeah, the same spot happens over and over again, but it's not a big deal. And then a note apart from the match, Matt, again, I don't know if you remember this. I did not remember this, and I don't know if there's any more backstory to this, but this is from the Pro Wrestling Torch. They write, Jay and Mark Briscoe have agreed to terms to return to Ring of Honor and will return on February 25th in Edison, New Jersey. The Briscoe brothers have been wrestling occasionally for a company backed by former Ring of Honor promoter Rob Feinstein. The rumored reason for their lengthy absence from Ring of Honor was because of a disagreement between their father and Ring of Honor booker Gabe Sapolsky. I don't remember anything about that, but that'd be interesting, like an early Papa Briscoe involvement in Ring of Honor. I can only imagine if Papa Briscoe, what a Papa Briscoe Gabe Sapolsky argument would have been like.
I wonder if that's the only mention of that particular theory in any major wrestling newsletter ever, because I don't remember hearing about it at any other point. And so that's interesting. I mean, I believe that the rumors are around because, rumors are rumors, but I don't know, it's weird that I've never heard that before.
Yeah, it's weird because when the Briscoes left, it was like, it's seemingly just because Mark got injured on a motorcycle accident, and Jay said, I don't want to wrestle without Mark, so I'm not going to wrestle until that's done.
And then there was, but the rumor I always heard was that they just weren't sure if they wanted to keep doing this or go to college and play football or other stuff like that, right?
Yeah, that was the other big rumor, was the college thing that came up too. But then I guess going to the story, there was that period where you mentioned at the start of the match, like the Briscoes did wrestle a few times for other companies between when they left Ring of Honor and when they came back. So I do wonder, maybe that does give some credence to this rumor, where maybe there was a brief time where the Briscoes were like, okay, we do want to come back to wrestling. And maybe there was a brief some kind of disagreement, but whatever it was, obviously if there was a disagreement, it got worked out because, and again, another one of those moments of weird modern day to Through the Years timeline kismet, like Tony Khan just announced a day or two ago on the Ring of Honor pay-per-view conference call that he assigned the Briscoes to an exclusive Ring of Honor contract. And here we are covering the show where they come back to Ring of Honor. So again, not the last pay-per-view, modern day pay-per-view to our timeline coincidence that will happen on this show.
Have they been in ROH continuously since this show?
I don't know if they ever took another break or not, but like,
I mean, ROH has taken breaks, but have they specifically taken breaks from ROH?
I mean, yeah, they have. I mean, God, I mean, they have been just the constant in Ring of Honor. It is more than anybody. But moving on, next we join Christopher Daniels and Allison Danger backstage. Daniels says BJ Whitmer has been a thorn in his side for the last couple of months, coming up to him again and again, complaining that Daniels didn't call Whitmer and he didn't reform the prophecy when he returned. Daniels says they had great times back then, but the reason why he never called Whitmer or brought back the prophecy is what he did to Allison Danger when he was gone. Daniels says Whitmer pays for it tonight. He's going to start and end it in one match. Gabe then says, cut from behind the camera, when Lacey walks up to Daniels and says she'd be more than happy to tell Daniels all about Whitmer, all his dirty secrets. Allison thinks Lacey should instead be focusing on Jimmy Jacobs, saying it looks like she has a situation brewing there. Lacey says it's just business with her and Jimmy's off training. He'll be back better than ever. Lacey again offers to tell them everything about Whitmer and tells Allison that women have to stick together in this business. And eventually, I guess this argument convinces them because the three end up walking away together with, I guess, the insinuation that Lacey's going to tell them all the incredible secrets on how to beat BJ Whitmer.
It's funny that this is a show with a number of, like, you know, kind of big matches that, like, settling feuds or matches that are continuing big feuds or, like, big title matches or matches that have been built up over a few shows. And none of them get, like, backstage promos to build them up, except for the match that doesn't happen, which is this one. I thought that was kind of a funny little quirk of the show.
Yeah, I guess it almost kind of felt like, to me, like a way to get Lacey on the show and continue the BJ Whitmer feud. And
but the thing is, they kind of, I mean, you know, they do sort of continue the BJ Whitmer feud because, you know, Jimmy Jacobs is still involved with BJ. But obviously BJ's focus greatly shifts to the CZW feud after this show.
Yeah, definitely. And also, did you think, I was thinking watching this promo, like, Daniels, it was almost too good a comeback for Whitmer, because Whitmer for a bunch of shows now was confronting Daniels, being like, you hung us out to dry, Chris, why'd you abandon the prophecy? And like, Daniels here basically being like, you beat up Allison Danger, like my manager and good friend, like, why would I want to be your friend ever again? I was like, that's such a good reason that, like, it almost makes me wonder, why didn't you just tell Whitmer that before? Like
maybe they didn't think of it. Maybe they forgot. They're like, oh yeah, that's what he should say.
Like that's just like a very good reason why he would not want to be friends with him again. But next we get a new top 5 rankings video. Low Key is still at number 5. Jimmy Rave at 4. Alex Shelley at 3. Christopher Daniels at 2. And Roderick Strong at number 1.
Meanwhile, besides Low Key, who's obviously gone, Daniels, he doesn't get a title shot. Like, so it's interesting that he's like sticking around at number 2.
Yeah, and Rave at 4, Shelley and Strong obviously will be very quickly. Danielson will get to go through all of them starting tonight. But yeah, the other two, not so much. I wonder if maybe they were still thinking in the back of their head, maybe there's still a shot that we're going to get that 3-way, that rematch from the first show.
Yeah, maybe.
That would make a lot more sense than if you were building to a key Daniels, which we know they were for the 100th show. Having them at 5 and 2 makes a lot more sense. But yeah, it never happens. So still time, Tony Khan. But next we have a 4-corner survival match. Adam Pearce defeated Azrael, Claudio Castagnoli, and Jay Theory in 11 minutes, 20 seconds when he pinned Azrael after he hit a top rope splash. So, Matt, on the last show, I criticized the 4-way we saw on that show for being devoid of personality, even for a random 4-way. I thought this is a 4-way that shows just what a little bit of character and a hot crowd can do, because this match may or may not actually have a little bit less moves with a Z than the previous show's 4-way, but I actually think this match is more entertaining because there's more glue holding it together, and the glue here is Adam Pearce and Claudio Castagnoli getting into it in the entire match. Like, Pearce is mocking Claudio. They're each blind tagging the other. At one point, Pearce needs to make a tag, but Claudio drops down to the floor, so he can't. It's nothing major, but it's something the match can keep coming back to that at least gives you kind of like a consistent little bit of a character point and a story point that just these two are really getting on each other's nerves and they're both charismatic. And it helps that it also pays off directly in the finish where Azrael's down on the mat. Claudio has Pearce sitting on the top turnbuckle ready to hit a move on him. But then Fury and Claudio wrestle a little bit. And their sequence ends with Fury taking Claudio out with a dive to the floor. And so Pearce kind of just comes to, still sitting on the top turnbuckle with Azrael still like laying out cold in the ring. And so Pearce just jumps off the top turnbuckle with a splash and gets the win. So it kind of pays off where Claudio and Pearce are antagonizing each other the whole match. Claudio almost has Pearce dead. And then kind of almost through like a banana peel win, Pearce kind of just finds the match gift wrapped for him because Claudio gets taken out. So, it's nothing great, but I thought this was like an above average, enjoyable little four-way. And you know me, I'm often a kind of hard on four-ways.
Yeah, I probably liked it a little bit less than you. It was fine, but not particularly memorable. It's interesting to see Claudio here in the sense that like he's similar to what he is now, but also so different. He's just a much more lighthearted character, definitely, throws his weight around a little bit less. He still does a lot of the European uppercuts and stuff like that. But, now he's just like such a serious, like monster of a wrestler who like just is like considered just like, so like, outclassing everybody and his execution is perfect. Whereas, back then he, was a little bit more lighthearted with the A's and he doesn't really show off his power quite as much. He still does a little bit. But obviously his body is just not as jacked as it is now. Just interesting to see that, as a guy who's going to be, in the ROH title match on the show that's the day after we're recording this, so many years later. Obviously Pearce is still doing a lot of the silly stuff, but not quite as silly as it was in the first few appearances in ROH. The one thing that did annoy me, because I still am enjoying Jay Fury. Like when I see him, I still think he impresses me with some of his big spots, but the crowd, and I remember this from being there live, they just wanted to chant that he looked like D'Lo Brown. Which, the body types and the gear are similar, but like, it must be really annoying for him to just like, they just call him D'Lo. And like, he does a couple nods to it, like he does the D'Lo Brown leg drop at one point, but it's just like, I don't know, to literally just call him D'Lo, it's like, it's disrespectful. And from a crowd that's supposed to be more respectful, you know what I mean? Like if he appeared at like a random indie show where it's just people who watch WWE or on TV, and then they're going to an indie show because, hey, it's wrestling in the neighborhood, and then they chant D'Lo, it's like, that's something that you might expect. Mm-hmm. But to go to an ROH show where it's like, these are supposed to be people that, really root for up and coming wrestlers and stuff, to just chant D'Lo at him, it felt rude to me. I don't know. Maybe like
no, I agree, and like it's different if they're an established heel, which he wasn't. He's a babyface, but like if you're calling Xavier AC Slater, that's okay, right? Like, would you agree? But
yeah. Well, that's because first of all, it's not another wrestler. That's
yeah. But like this reminds me of, we just had a show recently where, well, probably a few shows ago, but where Kid McCausey and Jason Blade won their first matches, and like they were looking good, and the crowd wouldn't stop like chanting Rufio at Kid McCausey, and that's I had the same feeling there as you did here, where it must suck to be like working your ass off, and the only thing that's getting a reaction of the crowd is your resemblance to somebody else.
Well, even just in life, it's annoying. Like, you ever have that thing where you're walking around, someone's like, "Hey, you know who you look like?" And it's just like, all right, like I didn't ask you who I look like. I have a rule. This is on a genuine rule. I never, unless prompted, like someone asks me, like I will never go up to somebody and just like tell them like who I think they look like. Like, I feel like even if you're trying to compliment with somebody with saying it often doesn't come off that way. There's just no benefit of like telling somebody they look like somebody else. That is a rule that I have in life. And I feel like, wrestling crowds might do well to have that rule. Because, I like Jay Fury, and they just called him D'Lo.
You know what's worse than that is when someone calls, like the worst version of that is when someone says you look like somebody and it's not a good looking person.
Well, yeah, of course.
They don't think it's a good looking person. Like, I remember once when I was a little kid, my dad forced me to go to a Dwight Yoakam show I did not want to go to, but my parents made the trade that if I went to Dwight Yoakam, we would get to go to a Nitro. And that's the incredible life I lived, Matt. But there was a drunk woman that kept yelling at my dad the whole time, "You look like Richard Kind." If you want to look up who Richard Kind is, he's a character actor. I've heard podcast interviews with him. He's a jovial, great guy, good performer, but like...
Yeah, we all know Richard Kind. He's been on everything.
No one wants to probably be compared. Like, no one's going to be enthusiastic. Like, really? You think I look like Richard Kind? Dare I hope? Like,
yeah.
Just kept yelling at my dad. I just felt like... I remember just that night, you talk about that, and it just reminded me, like, what's someone supposed to do when someone yells? Like, is he supposed to say thank you? Or is that supposed to start a conversation, like, about Spin City? Like, what are you supposed to do when someone chants, "You look like D'Lo Brown"? Like, was he? Yeah. Did they want him to hit the lowdown at that point?
Well, he did do a D'Lo Brown move. He did do that. So he basically did as much as he could possibly do. He did the leg drop. But yeah, no, it's true. Like, I know, like, when I was younger, it's not like I've never been guilty of doing that. Of like, say, "Yo, you look like blah blah blah." But like, I've come to realize as I've gotten older, like, it's just not a nice thing to do. Yeah, and the funny thing is, when people do it, it's like, it's so subjective because I've been told that I've looked like so many different people. Some are flattering, some are very unflattering. It's just like, but like, it's not like everybody agrees, you know? So it's just like, what are you doing? Like, you obviously don't even know what half of these people actually look like.
Anyway, yeah, and this is another match, getting back to the match, where, Claudio does a super long delayed vertical suplex on Jay Fury. So 2 vertical suplexes here. And I guess the last little note, Matt, this is Azrael's final match in Ring of Honor as a regular. He does, I think, do a couple dark matches in the future. But, Azrael's a guy who is still working in places like GCW to this day.
At one point, yeah. It's kind of sad to see because he's been a mainstay since very early on. At one point, by the way, Prazak refers to Azrael as the suicidal demon, which I assume is a nickname he's used on other indies, but I don't remember them ever calling him that on ROH, do you?
I think we heard it for the first time 1 or 2 shows ago, and we made fun of him. I mean, made fun of that nickname. We were like, how can you be suicidal if you're in hell? Like, aren't you already dead? But
it's true.
Pro Wrestling Torture at the time, Azrael and Ring of Honor have parted ways. The door is open for him to return at some point in the future. It wasn't open that much, apparently, because, again, he just does a couple, I think, dark matches down the road. But that brings us, Matt, to our next, our odd coincidence match of the night. Samoa Joe defeated Jay Lethal via pinfall in 14 minutes, 21 seconds after he hit the Muscle Buster. So 16 years later, Matt, tomorrow night, as we record this will be a rematch referencing this history. And this was also, speaking of guys' final matches in Ring of Honor, this would be Jay Lethal's final match in Ring of Honor as a regular. He would come back for 3 matches in the summer, and obviously he would come back as a regular years down the road when his TNA run ended. But in terms of like the Gabe Ring of Honor that we know, that we love, that we cover, and in terms of him being a every show regular, this is it for him.
Yeah. It is interesting. I mean, of course, then he comes back and has one of the, probably our greatest ROH runs of anybody, right? Yeah. Like, so, and I think he's sort of in one, like the Briscoes, I think he's sort of like one of the Mr. ROHs out there. And, that's obviously why he's being, placed in a major position in ROH, to this day, by the new Tony Khan version. And speaking of which, this is a big blow-off match between Samoa Joe and Jay Lethal.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but one of the top matches on Death Before Dishonor 2022, which I don't even remember what number Death Before Dishonor that would be, maybe 19, is Jay Lethal versus Samoa Joe. That's weird, right?
Yeah, and they're literally like referencing this with like Jay Lethal is referencing, "You are my mentor," which obviously is a storyline that was built in Ring of Honor during the era we covered. Like the story of their match today or tomorrow, I guess, is basically the story of this match. It's crazy. Like it's not even like a new layer of things on top of it. Really, it's just picking it back up.
Well, a new layer of really tall people on top of it. That guy's there. But yeah, it's a weird way for Lethal to go out because they really built him up before this. Like they were building him to be a big deal as a heel. And he's gotten better. Like, I criticized his heel performance at Hell Freezes Over. And it's definitely gotten better over the past few shows, and he comes out with like a bandana now with sunglasses, which I think is fun. So my memory of this match live was that I was kind of disappointed in it because I really like loved their babyface match at Manhattan Mayhem. I was a bit disappointed in their match at Steel Cage Warfare 2 where Lethal turned heel. But watching this back, I enjoyed it a lot more than I did live. I guess my expectations were lower, and that's, that helped. Because it was slow at times. And it wasn't, they didn't go all out to have this, like, ultimate blow-off match. But it was an entertaining, well-worked match. Joe, worked it very aggressively early. But, like, very quickly, Lethal gets the advantage. Like, to a surprising degree. Joe doesn't get a ton of, like, shine at the beginning. Lethal slows it down a lot. He taunts him with slaps to the back of the neck. He's showing some heelish arrogance. He's working over Joe's neck some more. He does a Flair-style rolling knee, which, another thing that's a current event. Lethal is going to be in, supposedly, Ric Flair's last match. And you see that, even though Lethal is already starting to do the Randy Savage thing with the bandana and the sunglasses, he's still throwing in a little bit of Flair in there too, with the knee and stuff like that. So you get to see, in this one match, you get to see Lethal's love for both of those guys, Savage and Flair. At one point, it's funny, Lethal has Joe outside and, like, throws him into the guardrail, and he's trying to get him back in the ring, and Sinclair's like, put Joe back in the ring, and Lethal's just like, he's heavy, which, I
love that. That was so good.
Yeah, it makes sense. He is probably is pretty heavy, probably hard to throw him into the ring. So when Joe starts coming back, he starts getting aggressive again, like kind of what you'd expect at the beginning. Kicks him in the head, knocks him down, drags him all over by the hair. Then he does a delayed vertical suplex.
3 for 3 on the show.
Yep. Not as impressive as Claudio's, but so the crowd didn't get quite as excited, but it was the third in a row. At one point, Joe actually does a fall-away slam, which it's always fun to see guys who you kind of know what to expect from them do moves you don't expect, especially given that this is like way in the past. But I don't remember seeing Joe doing fall-away slams before or since. I'm sure this is not the only time, but it's not common. At one point, Joe blocks a dragon suplex with elbows, and Lethal hits his own Joe-style power slam, which was pretty impressive to do on Samoa Joe. Lethal is a sneakily strong guy. He was only 20 years old here.
Yeah, that is so crazy that he was that young. Like,
yeah.
It makes me feel kind of bad because sometimes I've been, I think we've been fair, but like criticizing, how he was in slow and coming around as a character and his promos and stuff. And I think it's all been fair, and we've been kind of cognizant of his age. But like, he was a teenager during most of that. Like I do almost feel guilty. Like it almost feels like it's not fair to criticize anyone as a teenager for not being good at like a top level at something.
Yeah, when he did the infamous "Tonight Is the Night I've Been Waiting For," he was 19 years old. Yeah, that's nuts. That's a fact. Yeah, but he but like I said, when Joe's on offense, he definitely does work it. Like he's furious at Lethal, which I think helps. Like he grabs him by the hair, then by the face, and when Lethal's in a hold, he does the running knee to the corner. Lethal rakes Joe's eyes to get out of the muscle buster, and Joe blocks the running vertical suplex, so Lethal clubs at his back and hits it. And then Lethal just springs right up, goes for the diving headbutt, and the crowd actually does buy that near fall, like when he hits the diving headbutt. But then the finish comes extremely abruptly. Joe blocks a second suplex, puts Lethal on the top rope, hits an enziguri, and then muscle buster and gets the win. I feel like this was a good match, and I feel like the thing that stopped it from being very good is they should have built to the finish more. Like I think like this had some momentum. I think this was an entertaining match. I feel like they could have done like 3 to 5 more minutes and done some more near falls and had some more drama, and it could have been a really good match. And I don't know why they just decided they didn't need to do that, but because the finish just came really out of nowhere. But I thought that it was fun. Like, it wasn't everything it could have been. Like, they clearly didn't like work it as like the ultimate blow off. Like, there were obviously bigger matches later on the show and they didn't want to overshadow them, I guess. And Lethal was on the way out, but this was a fun match. These are both like good wrestlers that were showing personality and seemed to be having a good time, and the crowd enjoyed it and I enjoyed it.
So maybe this is expectations, because I felt revisiting this match all these years later more like you said you felt when you watched this live. I thought this was a good, like, decent match, like 3 stars, but like I was disappointed by it. And I do feel like this kind of reminds me of, like, Lethal's had a couple feuds like this where, like, the low key feud and this feud, or series of matches, at least with Joe, where like their first match is pretty darn good, and then no match afterwards kind of hits that level. And I think one of my problems with this match was, normally I like matches that aren't like your move, my move, back and forth. Like, I like those kinds of matches, but we see them so often in modern wrestling. But I felt like this was a match where the story just kind of wasn't what I wanted, in the sense of, like, Lethal dominates the first third to a half of this match, and I just didn't, after Joe gets a very initial flurry, and I just didn't buy that Lethal would get, like, Joe gives Lethal more here than he gives most people, and I just kind of didn't really buy it. And Jay's offense controlling Joe wasn't boring, but it wasn't enthralling either, and it was just a long sequence of him kind of being in control, with Joe getting very little in the way of comebacks here or there. And then, like you said, when Joe does come back, you get the kind of abrupt finish, and it did not feel like a feud ending match to me. It did not have, I thought Joe did a decent job of selling, like, his distaste for Lethal. There's that neat spot where he keeps dragging Lethal around by the hair and releasing it on a 4 count, doing a little bit of Bryan Danielson almost, instead of the ref's 5 count. But I didn't feel like Jay Lethal really wrestled this like this was like the big end to a feud. And even Joe, I felt, did a little bit more, but it still wasn't quite at that level. And it did feel more like what it was, which is just kind of like a kind of abrupt end to one guy's ROH run. Like, it's third from the bottom. There's not much in the way of, like, epic near falls, which you kind of want for a big feud ending match. You point out, I think, the one good near fall, which was when Lethal hits the running vertical suplex and the flying headbutt. That is the one near fall I felt like that the crowd really, like, bit into, but or bit for, whatever. They didn't chew it. But all that said, it's still a good match. Like, these guys are such pros. It's still enjoyable. It's just not kind of what I wanted from this kind of match. And I just felt like it was a little too much of Joe just letting Jay run things for a while. It was a little too much of that for me.
It'd be interesting to compare this to whatever they do in 2022. Like, what's better, what's worse. I assume that the 2022 match will be a lot more overbooked.
Yeah, and obviously Joe is not in the same physical condition, but they're both way more experienced. And
Joe is, obviously, he's physically older and more beaten up. Lethal is better, though. Lethal's better than he was then. Like, so, they're you kind of give a little bit of a trade-off.
And so Greg Chornomaz from his live report gives us this little tidbit that did not make the DVD. He says, after the match, Joe got on the mic and told Lethal that he thought he had what it took, but that he was beaten. So that whole little end, I don't know if that was just cut for time or because they figured, hey, Lethal's gone now, so why spend any more time? Like,
Also that promo doesn't say anything. that's a nothing promo.
The Observer had a quote about why this was Lethal's last match as a regular. Meltzer wrote, Jay Lethal is no longer being booked. Lethal, who just turned 20, took it well and was told that the door is open for them to do business again in the future. But Sapolsky felt he didn't want to spend time pushing him to be a new star when he can give the same push to someone not under a TNA contract. It's an attempt to stop relying on using as many TNA guys. The feeling is that Samoa Joe and Christopher Daniels are top guys, but Lethal isn't any more over than someone else who could be put into the same position that isn't under a TNA contract. It's uncertain how long AJ Styles would be used, but he is booked on most upcoming shows. Homicide will still be used because they don't know the long term of the LAX gimmick. So, yeah, this was, we talked about this on the last show, Unscripted too, that, this was going to signal a change, and we can, AJ Styles is going to be phased out in the medium term. Same with Alex Shelley. Abyss is already gone. This was Gabe, basically kind of protecting himself, saying, unless it's a guy I feel is such a big star, it's worth the risk. I am going to rely on as few TNA wrestlers now as I can.
I think it ends up working out okay for him to make when he makes that decision too.
Definitely. Next, we get a long video showing highlights of the previous year of Ring of Honor, and I mean long in that I timed out, I think it's around 7 minutes, and this is only the first video of 2 we'll see tonight, and this video, which is 7 minutes, only covers the start of 2005 through Punk the Final Chapter in August. But it is very extensive. I would say it covers highlights of every major angle and match finish, that's important from every show.
Yeah, they try to hit every single show.
Yeah, so it is extensive. If you want just a recap of the year in very rapid fire highlight form, this show's worth it just for that, because you're going to get between the two segments probably a 10 minute recap video of the 4th year of Ring of Honor. But that brings us to BJ Whitmer versus Christopher Daniels, scored to the ring by Allison Danger and Lacey, and it went to a no contest in 5 minutes.
Wow, it was actually 5 minutes long. I didn't even that's longer than it felt.
Yeah, well, sometimes with these no contests, you don't know how the people, I don't know who was doing the timing for this. It's always one of those weird things is when do you push stop on on the Green Lantern fan wrist timer. But I did notice that Allison Danger came to the ring. She had a new costume element, which I quite liked in a very corny way. She had a glow-in-the-dark halo above her head, on a wire, which I thought very corny, but I enjoyed it. Gabe gets on the mic to tell us that Lacey told Daniels earlier in the night that she's going to tell him everything she knows about BJ. And it was Gabe doing his old lecherous perv thing, which we have both railed on. But Matt, I have to admit, I laughed at that. I have to be honest, it was so stupid. I did laugh out loud.
Well, I think it was put in there with the butt of the joke was Jimmy Bauer, right? That the other announcers were like, "Oh man, shut up, that's so stupid," get out of here. Which I guess makes it a little bit less bad.
It is funny, and we'll see this later in the night. It is funny how much they've turned Gabe's announcer character, Jimmy Bauer, the guy who for multiple years was the voice of Ring of Honor, into this
comic relief
joke. They portray him as an alcoholic who just barges in and doesn't really have anything to do, and they're always making fun of him when he does, or stuff like this. It's kind of funny that they've just turned him into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it shows that Gabe is a good sport about that stuff. Yeah. As not great some of those lines about the women are. It's at least at this point it seems like he realizes that and is making fun of himself about it. Yeah, I think in a brief interaction we had on Twitter years ago, I think Gabe is more down on his commentary than you and I are. Yeah. He's yeah, I was awful. Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, one time on Twitter, I told him, you were a little bit underrated because, there were some matches where I do think he enhanced it. I'm on record for saying that the commentary on the Jay Briscoe versus Samoa Joe match, this cage match, made the match much better. And I love that match. And he says, nope, I fired myself. I was terrible. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, was he the best commentator of all time? No, but I don't think he's as bad as he thinks he was. Yeah. So, as for this match itself, it was obviously just a taste, and it was funny. For a second, I was why is this match supposed to be the big, they've been building up this feud for multiple shows, why is it so short? And then reading the news around this match after I had watched the show, I forgot that
Obviously, one of the recent matches we saw with Daniels, Matt, was that one with Matt Sydal where he hurt himself very early in the match. Apparently, Daniels had to receive some minor knee surgery between that match and this one. So this was basically a way of, according to like the newsletters, of protecting him. So he didn't have to do that much, didn't have to do a full match, but could still like work the show. So basically what we get here is just a taste. It's like a very basic match until Whitmer kicks Daniels' bad knee, which, commentary tells us has kept Daniels out for a month after the Matt Sydal match. And from there, Daniels sees red. He gets really pissed off. He spears Whitmer. He takes the fight outside. The two trade chair shots, and they brawl into the crowd, which is largely wasted on us because there's no lighting at the crowd. And at times, in fact, the screen is pitch black. I think at one point, one of them gets like thrown into chairs, and we do not see it at all. We can only hear it. So again, a big spot that gets missed out on. And then, as they continue to brawl into the back of the building, Chris Hero runs into the ring along with a bunch of CZW wrestlers. The one I really could pick out was obviously Necro Butcher.
Yeah, as a unless you're like a really major CZW fan, it just felt like a bunch of guys plus Chris Hero and Necro Butcher. Like, I'm not even totally sure they are CZW wrestlers. Like, are they? I can't even say that for sure because there are CZW people that I recognize, but these guys were just like in black t-shirts.
Chad Shaft might have been back, man. We forgot about Shaft. But Chris Hero, so yeah, he runs to the ring. He proclaims that he's, Heroes here is really good at being kind of like the guy who's he's being annoying. He's like, I'm back. And a bunch of the CZW wrestlers are with him. Hero sings happy birthday, but he ends it with happy birthday. Fuck you. As the CZW wrestlers are keeping out any Ring of Honor staff that's attempting to get in the ring and stop them. Hero talks about ruining Ring of Honor's birthday when Adam Pearce finally finds a way to sneak into the ring. He tackles Hero. BJ Whitmer and a bunch of the wrestlers who had already worked tonight soon join him back in the ring. They're brawling with the CZW guys. Austin Aries is in the melee. Broderick Strong's there. Just to see people brawling, the crowd is absolutely losing their minds for this. Like, just this huge, this is, the largest scale brawl we've seen in this feud so far. The ring clears as everyone moves to the outside, and Chris Hero then sneaks his way back into the ring, gets the mic again, and he starts asking, who's going to stop me? Who's going to stop me? Samoa Joe comes out. The two brawl in the middle of the ring. Again, crowd going nuts.
Somebody sets off a confetti popper at this point, so they're fighting among confetti.
That was literally my next line was, for some reason, the ring fills with confetti as they fight. Such a weird moment.
When that happens, it's always because it's a fan who does it.
Yeah. It's always weird because, we get confetti later in the night, but it's always weird,
That was also a fan, by the way.
Yeah, it's weird when, a fan brings confetti. You're thinking, okay, you bring confetti, you're going to save it for, a big ring entrance, right? What's the fans' logic? They're like, I'm so excited. You know what? I'm spending my confetti now. During this, heated brawl. You know what this needs? A bunch of colorful paper. It's such a weird thing.
And now that moment will be immortalized in time, or has been, where they're fighting just among confetti.
So, Joe gets Hero in the rear naked choke. Necro Butcher breaks it up, but he's almost immediately attacked by Adam Pearce, who's back in the ring now. Hero runs away as the Ring of Honor wrestlers chase the CZW wrestlers out of the ring, and they stand tall, and we get a huge Ring of Honor chant, followed by a big Samoa Joe chant as he stands on the ring apron, a bunch of the Ring of Honor wrestlers behind him, greatly kind of visual there. We then get a big fuck you Hero chant, and just as everyone is almost done leaving the ring, this is all settled down, the Briscoes attack Austin Aries. They start fighting with him and Roderick Strong. Wrestlers return to the ring to break that up and hold them back. The crowd chants, let them fight, very loudly. And as that calms down, Colt Cabana and Homicide brawl through the curtain to ringside. So before we get to the match that leads to, I guess we should just talk about this segment. This was a crazy segment. I would say the most heated CZW Ring of Honor segment so far. Certainly the largest scale with all the people. And of course, kind of a classic bit of Gabe booking because Gabe loves the giant schmoz with a million people segment that ends up connecting into multiple feuds. So it's
an ECW inspired thing. Yeah. And it doesn't always work, but I think it definitely worked here.
Yeah, and definitely, obviously, we get the CCW feud. We get the start of the Briscoes, Aries, Strong feud. It kind of all starts in the middle of a different feud, the Whitmer-Daniels feud, which isn't over. And then, of course, Homicide and Cabana organically just come to the ring. So just 4 different feuds there that are all getting involved. But I forgot, like, I am, again, not shocked, but I forgot how hot people were for the CZW feud, like, right from the start. Like, this wasn't something where people liked it, but then it slowly grew. It was like in every town so far we've seen the CZW feud introduced, like, it feels like it's been red hot right from the start. Like, the fans were ready from, like, show 1. Like, we really like this idea.
Yeah, I mean, but this was the best, like, so far,
Yeah.
like, by far. Like,
Absolutely.
this is, I would call this a absolute classic segment. Like, it just worked so well. Like, one of the best non-wrestling segments I think we've ever seen from ROH, honestly. Just in terms of, like, the momentum that it had. Like, I remember being there live, and, like, you wanted, like, okay, if we're going to do this CZW feud, let's do it right. Like, who's the ROH's face? And it's Samoa Joe. And, like, so when Joe came out to confront Chris Hero, it was like, oh shit, like, it's on now. And then just to have the whole Briscoes thing happen on the back of that, it just, I think, put it over the top. Like, obviously, the Daniels-Whitmer match was a total afterthought, like, not even worth talking about. You know, Daniels was injured, so it's fine. But this was just made up for it so much, and I think, obviously, Gabe knew that. The crowd loved it, like, and, you know, and there'll be twists and turns in the road in the CZW feud, obviously. It did remind me, though, you know, of certain things that they never got to in the CZW feud, like a Samoa Joe versus Chris Hero singles match. And you know, sometimes I think like, oh, there was more they could have done in that CZW feud, and I guess we could talk about it once we finally get to the end of it. But like, maybe that's okay. Maybe it's good in the end that they didn't do every little thing they could have done, and they just made it like more concise and just did what they needed to do. Like maybe that's fine. Like that they just hit all the most important beats and didn't suck every last little drop out of it that they could have. I don't know, but
I agree. It probably also hurts that like CZW did not really ring much. Like, you know, if Ring of Honor did not get every drop, CZW got barely any juice out of this. They didn't book many Ring of Honor guys on many shows, and it feels like, you know, that almost puts more pressure on Ring of Honor to book every big match possible in this feud, because like the whole other half of this feud wasn't really utilizing it very much.
Yeah, and again, like it's probably fine. Like, I mean, Samoa Joe has wrestled Chris Hero in other places. I'm sure that match would have been really cool, but you know, there are always the limitations because of the TNA involvement and stuff. So, you know, it makes sense maybe that Joe's involvement in this feud was multi-man matches.
They had a pretty famous match for IWA Mid-South fans,
Yep.
like in IWA Mid-South, Hero and Joe, where it was like a true like split crowd, where you had like half of the fans were like totally into Joe because Joe was Joe and awesome and like one of the biggest stars on the indies, and half the fans were like, no, like Chris Hero's our home promotion guy, like fuck Samoa Joe.
Yeah, I remember back in the day I asked you like what IWA Mid-South shows should I get, and that was one you definitely recommended to me.
Yeah, I remember Scott Christ, like currently people might know on Twitter as Tape Machines Are Rolling. That was a show he raved about that match, like that being an incredible live experience, just to be like, you know, one of those times where it's 50-50 or like a split crowd, but it's not like the crowd chanting both of their names. Like it was legit. Some people had a rooting interest in one guy and some had a rooting interest in the other guy. So those are always really cool. But that brings us to the Ghetto Street Fight. Homicide with Julius Smokes defeated Colt Cabana via ref stoppage in 18 minutes, 56 seconds after he pile drived him off the apron onto a table. I didn't notice I'm not saying through a table, because in fact what happens is he pile drives him onto the table and the table does not break. It just flips over and they both fall to the floor. Matt, you know, I would say this was, you know, part match, but part, again, like a lot of these Homicide Cabana matches, kind of just an angle. You know, a lot of story being told through the booking of this match. So what'd you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, in ways it was a submission match, but they didn't establish that until like I think like in the middle of the match that was how you win. Like they didn't like announce that right from the get-go, unless I missed something. Am I wrong about that?
Was this a submission match?
Well, they said at one point there's no pinfalls. The only way to win is if the other person quits, and they mentioned it on commentary, like kind of in the middle of the match. So I guess I'm right because you didn't even pick up on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were no pinfalls in the match. So, but you're right. Like I was going to say the same thing. This was more of an angle because really it was very dominated by Homicide. Like it was, you know, at the beginning, Cabana's in control. You know, he's just punching Homicide in the head over and over again. But, you know, Homicide gets control at some point and Cabana blades after Homicide chucks a chair at his head. And, you get Smokes there, like kind of adding the audio track, like he's screaming at Cabana, you bleed, you taste your blood, which, I think does add certain amount of atmosphere to the match. At one point, Smokes is handing weapons to Homicide, for instance, like a razor, like not like a straight razor, but like, like a shaver that you would use. Yeah. And he starts like slicing Cabana's head with that. Starts using the ROH sign like in the guardrail. Homicide, like Cabana will keep coming back and he gets his like fighting spirit face on, and like Homicide will keep cutting him off. Hits the running boot to Cabana's bleeding face. And I'd say it's not a CM Punk level blade job, but it is definitely one of Cabana's best blade jobs. Yeah. It's because he's had some ones that we've kind of said, okay, not so great. He's not as good as Punk at this, but this was a really respectable one. I still got annoyed at the crowd for chanting, "We want tables" in the middle of all this violence, as that's a pet peeve of mine, but
mine too. I was very annoyed at that.
Yeah. But I had to get over it. At one point, Homicide escapes out the back of a Colt 45 attempt and takes him down with a clothesline. And he gets a hold on, Cabana tries to choke out Homicide with his own arm while pulling his injured shoulder in the process. And Homicide's selling is extremely verbal. He's like, nah, I'm not giving up, which you don't hear very often. But they go back and forth. Homicide hits a lariat, and that's the point where the announcers say this is the only way to win is for the opponent to quit. Homicide does a kind of a reference to the Night of Tribute match because he starts trying to choke Cabana out with a hanger again, and at that point the announcers are screaming that Homicide's going to kill him, so Sinclair calls for the bell, and Homicide is declared the winner of the match. And this is when the story really kicks in. Because Homicide walks out, he's celebrating, Cabana is struggling to his knees, and he gets on the mic and he says he never gave up, and if he wants the match to end, quote, "you'd better fucking kill me." And the Rottweilers are all looking, Reyes is out, and they're like, this guy's crazy. And then Cabana says, "This match is officially restarted, you fucking asshole," which... I feel like when a wrestler loses a match, they can't just say, actually, we're starting again. But I guess in a ghetto fight, you can do that. So Homicide comes back. Cabana tries to elbow him, but, very quickly, Homicide is back in control, hits an ace crusher. Cabana hits a divorce court to the injured shoulder. And he starts really going after the shoulder now. He's like clawing it. He's biting at it. He grabs a chair, but Smokes grabs his leg, and so Homicide is able to smash the chair across his back, and Reyes is out, and they're triple teaming Homicide, and now, just like they did the reference to the Night of Tribute, and then they do a reference to Vendetta because they're tying Cabana's to the ring post, like they did when they tried to cut Cabana's tongue out, but instead of cutting Cabana's tongue out, I would say probably to me the sickest spot of the whole match. Cabana is totally helpless in the corner, tied up, and Homicide repeatedly chucks a chair at Cabana's face. Like, I feel like, this is a different time, and I know, like Cabana said, probably agreed to it, but, like, that felt so fucked up to me. I don't know if you felt the same way.
Yeah, because, again, for people that aren't seeing this, when Matt says, like, his arms are tied away, like, he cannot brace himself at all. So if Homicide throws that chair, like however hard it comes, wherever it's going to hit,
he does it twice.
Yeah, he just has to take it.
Yeah, and so at that point, obviously, Sinclair stops the match again, and the crowd starts chanting, "He's not dead," because I guess apparently they wanted him to be dead. I don't know. But Homicide looks in Cabana's face and yells, "This is over. You hear me? I did this to you," which I think is pretty good character work, I think. Yeah. And the Rottweilers walk out again, and then Cabana gets on the mic and says, "D, Nelson, Nelson," and the crowd starts a taunting Nelson chant at Homicide, and he says, I still got a beat in my heart. You better come here and fucking finish me off. You picked on the wrong guy, motherfucker. If you leave now, little Nelson Jr. is going to think his daddy is a pussy." And at that point, that line gets Homicide back in the ring. And Cabana, again, fights everyone off, takes Homicide onto the apron. They tease some big moves, but then Smokes gets on the apron and pours something in Cabana's eyes, which to me looked like water, but I don't know what it was supposed to be.
It's supposed to be rubbing alcohol, but
Okay.
it looks just like water, and clearly that's probably what it was. But
Yeah.
I think they've done that before, too, and they're going to do it again later in the idea of that's one of those spots they keep pouring that into his cuts, I guess.
Yeah. So obviously that, burns Cabana's eyes, and Homicide that's the end of the match. He like you said, he pile drives him off the apron onto the table. The table falls over. They're done. Cabana is out, and at that point, the match is over. And Homicide gets in Sinclair's face with the mic, and he says he wants a fight without honor in Chicago. Nobody disrespects me. I don't know if Sinclair is the person to ask about that, but I think that really signals that the match is over. Homicide is furious walking around the ring. He's throwing more chairs in the ring, continuing to taunt Cabana, who's unconscious. I think Homicide really put on a great performance. I actually think both guys put on a great performance. I think it, really told a good story. As a final gesture, Homicide wipes blood on the camera lens and yells, "Cabana, you're dead. Fuck Ring of Honor and fuck CZW. This is Rottweiler territory." And the camera stays on Cabana when the lights come up, and he gets to his feet with the help of 3 refs. But yeah, like you said, much more of an angle, but super dramatic. I think it told a great story. I think absolutely compelling. And unlike any other match that I could think of. And I think that really puts it over the top for me as a really great thing. I mean, it was too brutal, like in certain points, and I think that could put off a lot of people. I remember live, I think even being like, all right, this might be a little bit much. But looking back now, so many years later, I just appreciate the storytelling of it. Mm-hmm. And I think it was some really great storytelling. And I think great performances by both guys.
Agreed. I think this is very good. I would put this as a match a little below 4 stars when you kind of add in the storytelling. As a match, I can see people not liking this because, like you said, it's a little on the brutal. It's not a little. It's quite a bit on the brutal side. And
it's kind of a protracted squash.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because it's kind of it's kind of doing the things I criticized the Joe Lethal match for, but doing them right. I think because this is another match, even more so than Joe Lethal, where the heel dominates. I mean, Lethal dominated, the first half of that match. Homicide basically dominates the entire match, just destroys Colt. Colt gets just these little comebacks. But I feel like the point is, the Lethal Joe match, to me, I didn't really feel like that was the story to tell, was Lethal dominating Samoa Joe. Where this match, the whole point of this story, we're in the middle of the feud, is Colt Cabana is basically playing Tommy Dreamer in early ECW, where he will not give up. The whole feud's based on the fact that Homicide is kind of insulted that Colt thinks he's tough, and Colt is got a chip on his shoulder now that people don't think he's tough. So yeah, this entire match is Colt gets absolutely destroyed, but the point isn't that he's competitive, because he's not. It's the idea that 2 times the match is stopped, and 2 times Colt's I never gave up, I'm never going to stop, and he's proving how tough he is. And there's all sorts of little details I really like in the storytelling here. I liked that they brought back the coat hanger. I liked, that Smokes and Reyes interfered a little bit to give Colt just a little bit of an out. I love that visual right at the end, like you mentioned, after the match, where Homicide is wiping Colt Cabana's blood on the camera, and we can see it smeared still when it's we're watching Colt after. I like that they even did that little thing that we rarely see these days in Ring of Honor, where they actually show the lights coming on in the building for intermission, and Colt getting helped by the rest of the back. I like just little things like that make it seem different from angles you normally see. We're seeing things we usually don't see that are part of the show. But the one thing you mentioned that I really am glad you mentioned, because I think it's kind of the key of this match, is we've talked in the past about how Homicide's one of those guys where he is just a character of a human being, and he's great at being Homicide. But when we've talked about, there are segments where when he's required to do acting, that's not just him being himself or his kind of his wrestling exaggerated version of himself, he's not good at it. I thought in terms of acting, like you mentioned, this is probably the best Homicide performance I've seen, because this match kind of hinges on his acting in the sense, because after that first time the match is stopped with the coat hanger, Homicide's going to the back, and he's very jovial. And Dave Prazak on the commentary is like, the feud is over. And you can tell Homicide's like, he's like, kind of like, he's not angry anymore. He's kind of got this feeling like, I've proven what I'm going to do. He's like joking and jovial. And then Colt, when he gets on the mic and, tells Homicide I'm still here, Homicide does a good job of sounding like that kind of reaction of like, what the fuck? Like, he's still alive. He still wants more. Like, he's kind of not scared, but like a little bit like, what the hell's going on here? And then that second time the match stops and Colt gets back on the mic and says, hey, Nelson Jr., again, Homicide does a great job of then going now back to that. Now he's just obscenely angry in a way he wasn't for the rest of the match. Like, he does a good job of telling the story of Homicide was ready for this all to be over, and Colt is just going to keep pushing him until it's not over. And by the end of the match, Homicide has won the match, and his first thought is to yell at the ref, Todd Sinclair, and say, like you mentioned, like, I want another match with him. The only thing I thought was a little weird about that is Homicide's saying like he's so angry. And it's like, if you're that mad, and this is a feud where we've already seen Homicide try to cut Colt's tongue out and kill him with Drano, like, it's kind of weird to see him like have Colt completely unconscious and prone, and instead of just like continuing to get his revenge or trying to kill Colt again, he's like, his response is to go yell at the ref and be like, I want another match. Like, why not? Like, you have him right here if you really want that revenge that bad. Like, you just won a match. You could keep beating him up if you want. You're clearly willing to do that. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I get it. There was a point, like you kind of mentioned though, where Homicide almost felt like he was like, I don't want to go as far anymore. Like almost like, yeah. I just want, like you said, I want this to be over. Like, I'm showing mercy to you, Colt Cabana. And and now it's just like, all right, I've had enough of this motherfucker for today. But I'm not going to be, I want this to end once and for all, and I want to humiliate him in his hometown.
Yeah. And another great detail in that, like, I even loved, like, Todd Sinclair even, like, everyone does good acting in this match. I think the managers, the wrestlers, like, even Todd Sinclair at the very end where, again, the story of this match is Todd Sinclair stopped the match twice and Colt keeps having it restarted. So when that third time ends, I think Todd Sinclair, like, I've never seen, like, he gets angry and he says something to the effect of, like, the ref, to the time here is like, stop the fucking match. Like, you could, like, even he's saying, like he's so pissed off that, like, this keeps going on, and Colt getting brutalized. And then even when Bobby Cruz gets on like the mic, he's like, for the third time, like, he emphasizes like this is the third time the match has been ended. Like, I thought everyone did a really good job here of telling kind of the story of Colt Cabana is the guy who completely outmatched here, but he just will never give up.
Absolutely. But yeah, overall, I think like this is one of the matches that elevates this show a lot. Like, it makes it very memorable. And, the most memorable part of this feud so far, I would say.
I agree. So one thing I want to ask you, though, and I wonder if this is just a pet peeve of mine and if I'm just overthinking something. So Homicide, and he's done this before, but he does a bunch of Eddie Guerrero tribute stuff here. Like, he does does some of his mannerisms. He says Odele. He even does the lasso from El Paso submission. And what do you feel about, like, during this feud, Homicide's about as dark a heel as he's ever going to be in Ring of Honor. Like, on one hand, it's always touching when wrestlers, I don't want to tell wrestlers to not do tributes to, like, beloved, recently deceased legends, but it's kind of weird when, like, Homicide in this feud is like this evil guy who basically did attempted murder, but he's also doing, like, loving tributes to a beloved babyface wrestler. Like, it's weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, I get your point, but if you hadn't said it, it never would have occurred to me. So yeah. I guess that's sort of how I would process that.
I think it's probably one of those things that just for some reason hits me a little weird, and it probably, like you, will be completely fine or just go over the heads of most people. They'll be like, yeah, just something that happened. Dave Meltzer wrote in The Observer, the idea behind this match is that they felt they need to break Cabana out of his comedy and entertainment role.
You don't say. months after they started doing that already.
Yeah, exactly. Dave, a little slow on this one. And have him more of as a serious main event player. There's definitely a thought to push the non-TNA guys harder after what happened a few weeks ago, which Gabe Sapolsky said he took as a wake-up call. Although Sapolsky has also said he's had no negative interaction whatsoever with TNA since the incident. Yeah, I don't think, like you said, like, Dave, a little slow on this one. I don't think this cult push is necessarily because of the TNA thing, because it's been starting for months ago. But clearly, this year, Colt's going to get like a multiple world title matches. So it's funny though, because I wonder when they were starting this, how much of the hope of like how this would change Colt was, because like when this feud is over, Colt does, go back and incorporate a lot of the comedy right away again. In fact, I think he even said something in the media like, I'm glad I can go back to doing like the more happy-go-lucky stuff. And I wonder if Gabe had a hope that maybe like this would completely turn Colt like 100% serious, where I think what we learned after this feud is like for Colt Cabana, I think personally, and I think as a fan, like having some comedy in him is always going to be like an essential element, I think, of Colt Cabana long term.
Yeah, although, it's interesting that in AEW, especially at least in the matches, he really didn't do that much comedy.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to see that.
Although, to be fair, he hasn't really gotten to show his stuff in AEW in that sense, because I think he would stick out more if he was allowed to do a bit more of the comedy. But,
well, that's what I'm saying. But
yeah.
We'll see what his role is in the new ROH.
Yeah, definitely. That'll be interesting to see. I mean, as far as I know, we're doing this podcast. Rampage is going to start soon, and I think they're going to say they're going to announce a couple more matches to the show. I wouldn't be surprised as we're doing this podcast that Colt Cabana has a match announced for the pay-per-view. I wouldn't shock me. But we go back to Jim Cornette in his office, where he is just finishing getting a phone call informing him about the CZW run-in tonight. Cornette is understandably pissed, and for the millionth time already in the short history of this feud, calls the CZW wrestlers jizz moppers at a peep show. Jim, get a second line for them, please, for the love of God. He calls Chris Hero Chris Zero, so very clever stuff here. Cornette says the first thing he did when he got home after the CZWs knocked out his tooth in Dayton wasn't going to the dentist, but going to the Louisville Slugger factory to get a new bat right off the assembly line. He shows us the bat. Cornette says Ring of Honor is banding together, and if CZW wants war is what they've got. CZW wrestlers won't need to mutilate themselves for much longer. Jim's going to do it for them. Cornette says he takes his new bat everywhere with him, and he's even given it a name, Olvelma Lou. Which, is that name from the 20s? I don't know. But Cornette says when he gets one good unobstructed shot on CZW wrestlers, it won't be like you see on TV. Some goof getting hit 6 times with a sledgehammer and getting back up. So a little shot at WWE there. They will go down and stay down with one good shot. Cornette says he will be there in person in Chicago, WrestleMania weekend. And if CZW tries to interrupt the most important events in Ring of Honor history, Cornette will have awards for the Ring of Honor wrestlers that hit the CZW wrestlers the hardest and make them fly the furthest. Cornette quotes Harper Lee and April Wine, and then he tells CZW he's going to hit them with his bat. So,
I mean, I think the obvious thing that stands out is the cognitive dissonance of him talking about the violent, mutilation of the CZW wrestlers immediately after one of the most violent matches we've seen in ROH in a long time, right? Like, to me, like, that stands out as being kind of ridiculous. But also, like, obviously it's a good promo. Like, I don't want to, bury the lead. Like, he's great at cutting promos, and it's intense, and, like, it obviously worked. But, looking at it now, it's just like, this guy was 44 years old and seemed so hell-bent on seeming like he was 70 with his, like, just his references and just, like, his attitude. I don't know.
Yeah. It's like, it's weird to like. I feel like Jim Cornette's one of those guys. It just seems like he was 53 for like the last 30 years, and you forget he was acting like a lot of his references and stuff seemed old, like you just said, when he was like not that much older than we are right now.
He's only 60 now.
Yeah, it's. I think people forget how young he was. Like it's weird.
Heyman's another one, by the way, that always seemed a little bit older than he actually is.
Yeah, probably because they both got into wrestling so young, right?
Yeah, of course, because they've been around forever, but they were so young when they started.
Yeah, but I feel like it's weird. Like, people forget how Cornette has basically been doing the "it was better back then" stuff. You could even think with like Smoky Mountain Wrestling, which was a throwback promotion when he was in his 30s,
early 30s.
Yeah. Like that's really like for people saying like Jim was right about it was better back then. Like, he thought it was back then, quote unquote, at a far younger age than most people, like, get jaded and feel like things have passed them by.
Yeah, and like so you get that. I mean, but like again, I don't want to overstate this. Like he cuts really good promos.
Yeah.
Like he did a really good job of like seeming angry about this. Like I
agree.
yeah, I mean, I just, it's not my cup of tea in the sense of like calling them the hardcore boys and like all that stuff because it's like again, ROH does hardcore wrestling. They just did a really brutal hardcore, but like it's like that's just my personal stuff. This was good.
Did you think it was a little weird? Like, it's one of those things that it sounds good when you're saying, but when you think about it, it doesn't sound as good. Like when he's like, the first thing I did when I went home is I went to the Louisville Slugger factory and got a brand new bat fresh off the line. Like for a second, my gut instinct was like, wow, that's badass. And then you think about it for like 2 seconds and go, like, couldn't you just have gone to a sports store and bought one? Like, did you really need to go to the factory and get a brand new one? Like,
well, he was showing Louisville pride, you know, like it's like I got a fresh one right from the factory because I can do that. I'm a Louisville guy. Louisville, right? That's how you pronounce it. Louisville, not Louisville. And a Louisville guy, and he, he probably knows the people at the factory, and they're like, "Oh, JC, he's in town. Let's give him a fresh new bat." He could probably get a new bat there anytime he wants.
I love the idea that he's just on like initial terms with them, like, "Oh, JC, you get a bat every 2 weeks." You know, just. You think it'd be much more on those terms with like the racket company. Like, Jim, you'll love the new model we made. It's got more strings than ever. You're really going to love this one.
Does Louisville Slugger make tennis rackets though? That's the question.
So
Louisville Server. I don't know.
We're coming back from intermission. And this match did not make it to the DVD. It is Bobby Dempsey defeated Mitch Franklin in 2 minutes 15 seconds. And apparently this match was not planned. So Dave Meltzer wrote in The Observer, because Jack Evans was late in arriving from Japan, he was working for Dragon Gate, and his flight, scheduled to arrive at 7 p.m., ended up 3 hours late. They had to send Bobby Dempsey and Mitch Franklin out to fill time. So, Matt, what I love about this story is this was a time filler match that went 2 minutes and 15 seconds. How much?
You literally could have just done nothing for that time.
Exactly. Like, even adding entrances, like, what, you're getting 3.5 minutes here, maybe?
I mean, hey, you know what? Give them some ring time. Good for them.
But that brings us to the Ring of Honor World title match. Bryan Danielson defeating Jimmy Rave, who was scored to the ring by Prince Nana, via ref stoppage in 32 minutes, 5 seconds after he hit crucifix elbows. And apparently Jimmy Rave has said on the an Honorable Mention podcast that this match actually went on a little bit earlier because, again, that I guess the Jack Evans Ricky Reyes match was supposed to go on before them, but again they had to shuffle things around as they waited for Jack to get to the building. But one thing I always really like in world title matches is when it feels like the match is really important to the challenger, and it feels like they're raising their game up. And I felt like Jimmy Rave felt that way here.
One of the biggest examples of that, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, this performance from Ray feels like it's his, like, you can feel it feels like this is a big opportunity for him. He's really putting his best effort out there. And I think his performance is aided immensely by Bryan Danielson, because it feels also here like Danielson is working really hard to make Rave look like a credible threat and giving him a lot. Like, it's funny, we've seen a trend in Danielson's matches as champion ever since he kind of clicked on that character of like the best in the world kind of grumpy Bryan Danielson, where he kind of almost eats up a lot of his opponents and dominates them. And I felt like in terms of that character, this has been about as generous, other than maybe Marufuji, as he's been as that character. Like, he gives Rave quite a bit here, and while he is still that character and still cocky and doing the I have till 5 and stuff like that, he's not, he gives Rave a lot more than he's given Roderick Strong or guys like that, I would say, in recent months. Likewise, there's not really any cowardly comedy from Rave here. He's being a heel, but he's not, bowing out. He's not playing like he would in a tag match with Alex Shelley, where he's doing a lot of begging off or things like that. He is competitive with Bryan Danielson. In fact, a lot of the early mat wrestling in this match is like Rave kind of shockingly getting out of things that Danielson put him in and countering things and holding his own. And even the announcers point out, like, wow, like, Rave is really doing well here against Bryan Danielson. And then the match slowly builds, and we get into those final 10 minutes where the action really kicks in. And then Danielson, even there, lets Rave survive a lot. He does the flying headbutt, the belly-to-back superplex, the realplex, the cow mutilation. Rave does – none of that stuff puts Rave away. Nana does hit Danielson once behind the ref's back. He does pull the ref out during one key near fall, which, again, is one of my pet peeves. I hate when it's the least imaginative thing you can do, where there's no reason the ref should not disqualify you because he knows for a fact what you did when you literally tug him out of the ring mid-count, but whatever. Otherwise, though, other than those two spots, though, not really much in the way of cheating here. In terms of pure entertainment, this match satisfies. I wouldn't say it's a high-end match of the year contender, but I would give this like 4 stars. I would say this is a great match. The pacing is really good. It goes a half an hour, but it never drags. And when it starts to kick in that high gear with the last 10 minutes to go, they pace out the last 10 minutes even where it doesn't feel like overkill or some dramatic shift. Like sometimes we watch these matches and I say to you, Matt, like, oh, this match was kind of slow, and it feels like they flick a switch and go into ultra high gear. This match, it felt like it had like a good natural progression where it didn't feel like they just went from 0 to 60. And I guess one of the only criticisms I would have of this match is something that's kind of these guys had working against them, which is you never really get the impression that the fans ever buy that Jimmy Rave can beat Bryan Danielson. There are maybe 2 near falls in this match where it feels like some of the fans buy a little bit into it. One of them is after Rave hits one of the best running knees I've ever seen him hit. Feels like a few fans maybe buy into it, but just the way these two have been booked and stuff, there isn't a lot of tension in those near falls. But overall, I would say this is like a low, like great match. It's another great Danielson match, a really good individual performance of Jimmy Rave. And I know Jimmy Rave has said that he feels like this is one of his favorite matches he's ever had in terms of singles matches.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I would say on the list of most important matches, singles matches Rave has had in ROH, this, maybe the second or the third, probably behind the Punk Cage match. Yeah. Probably ahead of the other Punk matches. Maybe that dog collar match in Manhattan is up there, but otherwise this has got to be Ray's biggest match. And yeah, he really does rise to the occasion. Like you said, Danielson was his cocky heel character, but I would have to say he barely was. I think he toned down that character a lot for this match. He really doesn't do a lot. He doesn't do any taunting of the crowd at all. He doesn't ask the ring announcer to do a modifier on his introduction. He really tones it down. He's a lot closer to 2004 Bryan Danielson than he has been in his other matches. Not completely, he's kind of in the middle, but he lets Rave shine here. Rave does, he rises to it. I would actually say if I was going to pick who is the MVP of this match, Danielson is always just the best, but I think it's Rave. Rave is the one that really had to step it up to be different, and he did. And, I thought, like you said, it's a great match. Not a high-end match of the year contender, yes, but I do think I like the match more than you. I think this match is a little better than 4 stars. It's a memorably good match. And, like I said, it is long. The pacing is good. When Rave does a lot of the stuff where he steals other guys' moves, he does the cattle mutilation and he does a camel clutch, and his cattle mutilation wasn't bad. He also does a Danielson-style top rope superplex, which was pretty good. Danielson, just to show that he is the babyface in this match for a change, he actually does top rope corner punches, which you don't see very often. And like you, I don't like the pulling the referee out of the ring thing, but I will say this. It did set up a fun spot, because immediately after he pulls the referee out of the ring, Danielson does a tope onto Nana and wipes him out. And I thought that was a good spot that got the crowd going. The thing about, Rave, them not buying Rave winning, it's kind of like you said, it would have been nearly impossible to get fans to believe that Danielson was going to lose the title here. The only thing that I feel would have maybe done it is if they really went heavy on the interference at the end, the belt shot kick out always works, right? Mm-hmm. But they didn't do that. They wanted to go for a more classic wrestling match. And so this is the best they could have done, I think. And they did a pretty good job. Danielson really built up Rave here. And the other thing that I noticed about this match is in a lot of Danielson's other matches, they don't really do what we've seen so far, I mean. They don't really do the real, like protracted, like, extended finishing sequence where there's a lot of big false finishes and dramatic stuff. And I do think that this one had the kind of the best, like, longest finishing sequence of any Danielson title match yet. Like, the first 20 minutes were slow and building, and the last 10 minutes were really exciting, like, the whole way through. It was long and it worked. It didn't feel too long. And I feel like it's almost like a template for Danielson matches that will be coming in the next, the rest of his title reign, I should say. So I thought this was a really interesting match, and I do think it was a great match. One of the highlights to me of Danielson's title reign, honestly, especially at this point. It's probably my second favorite Danielson title match after the second Roderick Strong match, I would say. I really liked it that much. I'd say maybe on par to me with the first Roderick Strong match, the one that you liked better, but, like, I'd say well above any of his other title defenses.
One thing I want to mention too, because we both commented about we didn't like the Nana interference, is I do want to point out, even though I didn't like that one interference spot, like you said, it did have the big payoff with Danielson taking him out with a dive, but also I do think Nana was really good in this match. Like, I felt he was really good at showing the emotion without being overbearing. Like he does the thing even late in the match where he takes off his jacket because he's getting so heated. Like Nana to me even felt like he was doing like a world title performance where he was really selling how important this match was, to him, that Rafe could win the world title for him here. And a couple other notes.
Before you mention this, so I agree with you. This isn't like a match of the year candidate, like, overall, but for ROH matches that we've watched so far from 2006, this might be the best match of the year so far. To me, it's either this or the Seidel Styles match. But just, I felt like worth noting. This, this is the fifth show of the year, and I feel like this has had a good case for being the best ROH match so far.
No, I agree. This does have a good case for that. Another thing is, we didn't mention it, Rave bleeds out of his mouth. Really, I mean, I don't know if it just looks worse because it's mixed with saliva, but there's one point in this match where he just spits this long, big, thick string of red liquid out. Like, he gets busted. I don't know what busted him open, but he gets busted open pretty good in the mouth. Just very enjoyable match. So after the match, Rave sells being out cold in the ring. He's completely motionless for Danielson's entire celebration. Nana gets in the ring to yell at the ring announcer that the belt was supposed to come to him tonight, but then Danielson scares Nana out of the ring. Brian shakes an unconscious Jimmy Rave's hand, and we cut to moments later when we get like a camera cut to clearly some time has passed, Danielson's gone. Nana's back in the ring, and he's helping Rave. Rave's face is smeared with his own blood, and he's just helping to the back. And I thought, like, even stuff like that, I like that they spent a little bit of extra time just to show like how badly destroyed Rave was from this and how pissed off Nana was. But next, we get another extended video package of highlights from the rest of Ring of Honor's fourth year. So I said that first package ended in August. This goes all the way to, I believe the last highlight is CM Punk from the very last previous show, Unscripted 2. So really covering literally everything in the fourth year. And then that brings us to Ricky Reyes with Julius Smokes defeating Jack Evans via submission in 7 minutes, 57 seconds when he made Evans tap out to the Dragon Sleeper. Matt, I posted a clip of a botch that, not even a botch, I would say it's a missed catch by Ricky Reyes for Jack Evans. And I was shocked. That thing, I think, got like tens of thousands of views. Like, it got crazy. Like, but it's crazy because no one I don't think many people remember that. And yet, like, you watch and go, holy shit, like, that's one of those I can't believe he survived spots. But, I mean, this whole thing, I mean, before I get to you, I guess the story of this match is, we touched on it a little bit, Jack Evans, the announcers even talked about Jack Evans was supposed to get here in time from Dragon Gate. He had like a 14-hour flight. They said the flight was 3 hours delayed. So they say on the commentary, I don't know if this is true, but I have no reason to doubt it, that he basically got there 10 minutes before match time, didn't have any time to warm up. It looks like Jack Evans, like one of his boots might not even be laced up because there's like long laces dangling from it. And you can tell in his performance that he is not all there in terms of just being prepared. He's wrestling like a guy who just got to the building.
It's actually amazing that some of the spots that he hit well, he was actually able to hit, because he does hit a few of his crazy spots. Okay. But he does a few botches too, obviously. It's interesting because like you mentioned the boot thing. It's like if he had gone out there and been like, hey, I just got here, everybody. Give me a second to lace up my boots. And he just did it in front of everybody. They probably would have been okay with it. Like the crowd probably would have like cheered him on as he was lacing his boots. Yeah, I mean that this match is memorable for that one spot. But they do have a match before that. They start hot and heavy-ish. Evans does and connects and executes well a springboard 450 onto the floor onto Reyes and Smokes. And at one point, Leonard even says Evans is showing no signs of jet lag, which I'm just like, why even say that? Like, it's like that just makes it worse later, because like a minute later, Smokes is on the outside telling Reyes, he's got jet lag. He's got jet lag. Ricky, take care of him. And Leonard said he had no jet lag. Who will be right? I think we know the answer. But Reyes does some very blunt crowd work here because he goes, "Come on!" Like the crowd's chanting, "Let's go, Jack!" And he goes, "Come on, let's go, Jack! You stupid fucks!" Which I'm just, you could not a lot of subtlety to that healing on the crowd. At one point, Smokes refers to Evans as a Malibu rapper, which I assume is referencing the classic movie Malibu's Most Wanted. Which what year did that movie come out? 2003. So we're just a few years past that movie, but clearly that's what he was referencing, because one thing about Jack Evans, he is not from Malibu. But
maybe the only wrestling podcast this year you will listen to that has referenced John Lovitz, Richard Kind, and Jamie Kennedy in the same episode.
Yes, although I will probably have edited out the John Lovitz reference, but just know that it was in there. Evans does hit a Rana at one point, and then he hits a handspring, not perfectly, but okay enough, and he hits a well-executed springboard to the back of Reyes' head. But one of the first big signs that Evans is not what he should be is he's trying to do this thing where he runs up the turnbuckle and like jumps into a Rana but he really botches it fairly dramatically. And finally, we get Leonard acknowledging, yes, indeed, Jack Evans has jet lag. And, again, Evans does a few more okay things, but then when Reyes gets to the outside, Evans goes for a double moonsault, which, okay, so listen. This was extreme circumstances. Evans was probably not in a position where he should have been wrestling. At the same time, probably should not have tried the double moonsault, because if he had gone for just a single acai moonsault, he would have hit it, because he did flip over once. But I don't want to victim blame. Like, it was very scary. Like, he landed hard on the back of his head on the floor. Like, really, like, Reyes got an arm out, but, like, he really didn't catch him.
And it was a non-padded floor.
Yeah, a non-padded floor. He just splatted on the mat. Like, it really is sort of like the thing where it's like he could have easily been dead. Like that's how scary it was. And Evans is somehow moving. Smokes taunts the crowd. But, like, what happens after is, honestly, from a 2022 standpoint, pretty shocking. That Reyes throws Jack back into the ring and hits a triple powerbomb after what just happened to the guy. Like, it seems like almost like cruel. And obviously Evans kicks out. Like, I obviously it doesn't sound like he was upset about it, right? At the time, maybe that's just what you did. And the crowd was very behind Jack. But like, I do want to mention this because I was live for this. Many people in many sections of the crowd had no idea about how bad that fall was. Like, you could not see that from most of the building. Like, he didn't land right, but I had no idea that he landed the way he did. So I wasn't like sitting there being like, oh my God, like watching it on video. Yes, I was. But from where I was sitting, like, I couldn't tell how he landed. I know he didn't land the way he should have, but to me, it's like there's a difference between like a botched move and like, oh my God, that guy should be dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's really good you mentioned that, Matt, because one of the many comments I got when I posted that clip was someone, obviously you got the usual horrible trolls that then immediately tagged Jim Cornette and were like, Jim, you got to see this mark doing this spot, which is funny because they did not even realize that Jim Cornette was the commissioner of Ring of Honor while he was doing this. But anyway, there was one person that said something like, I bet those fans just chanted, you fucked up, or like laughed at it. It's like, one, no, they didn't. And two, like, as you mentioned, like on spots like that, a lot of times, a lot of the crowd does not even see the extent of what happened. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of unfair to like psychoanalyze crowds based on stuff like that.
Yeah, but the crowd wasn't being like disrespectful. Like they just were treated.
No.
I mean, they were reacting to the match because they continued having a match, And like so, Evans kicked out of the triple power bomb, and the crowd did get behind him. Although like he was really a mess at this point. His pants were falling down. And Smokes yelled, "Kill the Malibu Rapper!" And I'm just thinking like he basically did already. But like Evans actually hits a Fisherman's Buster, and he goes back up for the 630. But Reyes crotches him and hits an Orton-style DDT, like a draping DDT off the top rope, and turns it into the choke, and Evans taps. And like, based on what happened in the match, obviously it makes sense that Reyes would win. Although I'm not really sure like what the booking direction was, because obviously Reyes wasn't going to get the push that Evans would get. But like, yeah, that match was dramatic and scary, and like obviously not good because of how Evans' condition. And I'm glad that it didn't end up being worse than it was. But yikes.
Yeah. I thought this match was entertaining, but also incredibly uncomfortable to watch because, yeah, it was one of those matches where watching it, knowing the story of Jack Evans just barely having any time to get there and all that stuff, like, he should not have been wrestling on this night. Like, they should have just told him when he got there that late, like, Jack, like, maybe you can take the night off. The world did not need Jack Evans versus Ricky Reyes, but, it was entertaining. Like, this was a more competitive match than Reyes has been having lately. And whenever Jack is on offense, he's trying to do something crazy. And whenever he's not on offense, he's taking like a big bump like Jack Evans does, like on a Saito suplex. But yeah, like you mentioned, one of the key botches. Another one was just he does that handspring elbow into the corner where like the elbow is supposed to take him the momentum of over the top rope onto the apron, and he can't get over the top rope. And it's just some moments like that where you can just tell he's not clicking tonight because he just got to the building and he's not even laced up his boots. And, that dive, for those like who haven't seen it, it is, again, it's on my Twitter now, buried under 8 miles of his man tweets, but like it is a frightening, frightening spot where, like Matt said, I think Matt, you said it perfectly, where like, it would have not to be morbid, but if someone to show you that clip and then told you without context that guy died from that or got paralyzed from that, you would believe it. You would go, yeah, that makes sense. Like the fact that he is up within 60 seconds taking a triple power bomb. Like again, that's part of that made me feel uncomfortable. Like they should have just finished the match there. They should have ref stoppage or something. And
this will happen again, like with the Jimmy Jacobs, BJ Whitmer match on a few shows from now. But like, yeah, I think even that maybe not quite as scary as this, as horrible as that was too.
And Jack Evans is one of those guys. It's just, I am amazed he is still wrestling to this day. Like he's in his 40s now, I think, and he is one of those guys where I am shocked he has held. I mean, obviously, you could watch him now. There's miles on his body. He's not what he once was physically, but like. I remember 10, 15, I mean, God, he's one of those guys that probably in the first 2 years of his career, people were writing in newsletters and stuff like, oh, Jack Evans won't be around for much longer. And
not only is he still wrestling, he's like, he doesn't seem like he's physically all that bad off. Like he's, not like he's, I mean, not like, I'm sure he's, 40 and like, beat up, but like, he doesn't seem like so much more beat up than like most 40-year-old veteran wrestlers.
It's crazy. And I always remember this one story. I forget if it was a PWG triple shot or a double shot, but there was 3 matches for him on it. I don't. Either way, I remember it was him and Angelico on this night, and Jack Evans takes this bump over the top rope and just takes a huge bump without touching the ropes, lands like bumps on the hard floor. And I thought that's the kind of bump that'd be insane for anyone to ever take. And I thought, I can't believe he did that. I think Jack ended up doing that every time he wrestled that weekend. Like he found an excuse to take that bump every single match. And it's just something like that. You watch that guy and you think, I get why people say, oh, he's not going to last, but yet he did. It is crazy that he did, but he did. The Observer wrote, Reyes beat Jack Evans with the Dragon Sleeper. Jack Evans was rushed to the building and wasn't even wearing his gear and seemed a little off as he hadn't even had time to warm up. Crowd seemed to understand. Sloppy with one botched spot and 2 crazy dives, one which was said to be really scary. Yes, Dave, very much so. And then I thought this was interesting. Wade Keller, when he reviewed the DVD, Wade Keller, maybe not watching as much wrestling around the world or indies as Dave Meltzer or a lot of the most hardcore fans, but Wade Keller has seen a lot of wrestling, even by 2006. And so I think this says something. Wade Keller wrote upon watching this match, quote, the Jack Evans backflip crash and burn on the floor was among the 5 scariest bumps I've ever seen. And it is one of the, I don't think that's crazy to say. Even for me, it's that's definitely one of the scarier bumps I've ever seen someone walk away from, I would say.
Yeah, or get up immediately, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you've seen scary bumps, but bumps where they didn't finish the match. The guy is doing spots in a minute later. But that brings us to the main event, Ring of Honor World Tag Team title match. Generation Next of Austin Aries and Roderick Strong defeated AJ Styles and Matt Sydal in 23-11 when Aries pinned Sydal after hitting a 450. I'd be interested in knowing if this was the original planned main event, because on an Honorable Mention episode with Jimmy Rave, he mentioned that they had to go on, he and Danielson, he said, quote, way earlier than we had planned, which there were only 2 matches left on the show. So part of me goes, it can't have been that much earlier, but maybe part of me wonders if that was the main event, but because they knew Danielson and Rave could go long, they put that on then before.
I have a memory, and I can't guarantee this is true, but I have a memory that they announced this was the main event before the show, on the website. They said the tag titles would be the main event of this show.
That's interesting. That makes sense because they were trying to put more focus on the tag belts, and this is a pretty big match. But it is interesting because Rave said in the interview, we only had time to work out 1 or 2 spots because they went up way earlier. But yeah, if you think about it, they only then went up probably 1 match before they were originally planned. But anyway, I would say this is another low grade 4-star flat match, but obviously completely different than the Rave Danielson match. Obviously, this is I would call this match the work rate version of big dumb jock wrestling, where sometimes people talk about old Steiner matches and stuff as big dumb jock wrestling, but in an affectionate way where it's just guys chucking around other guys. And I would call the work rate version of big dumb jock wrestling almost prime Davey Richards or stuff, where it's just guys that work really hard doing move after move and just really the execution is really good. And I would say there's not much story here. Yes, Strong kind of taunts Matt Sydal once or twice. And yes, there is the basic classic tag team match structure of 2 face and peril hot tag sequences. But this is really just about 4 really good workers doing a ton of action, doing a lot of moves, and also stiffing the shit out of each other. I think that's the thing that makes this a little bit special, where the bar for these kinds of just all-action tag matches, I feel has been raised so much, in modern days. You see a tag match, I would say, this good frequently, especially in, a place like AEW.
Yeah, this feels slow by modern standards.
Yeah, but what I would say this match has that those matches doesn't is there's an element of stiffness here that isn't in a lot of those. Particularly Roderick and AJ really go stiff each other quite a bit. I don't know what was in Roddy's Wheaties on this day, but he was really laying it in. At one point, he caught AJ high with a kick right in the face. Their exchanges are stiff enough that you can hear Dave Prazak legit popping on a commentary at one point, whoa. And having that kind of mixed in with the high spots, I think kind of makes a match feel more like a battle than just a collection of moves when you have nice high spot, but then 2 guys just throwing a couple of stiff forearms. And I like how it kind of got broken up like that. Like you kind of just alluded to, this match doesn't really have a breakneck pace until maybe the final few minutes, but the whole match is kind of this mid-tempo that's in a satisfying way. You get your dive train, You get Aries catching someone right in the head with a flying top rope drop kick, which was really neat. Probably not great for the wrestler that took it. You get one of the best sick kicks from Roderick Strong ever, that running single leg big boot he does, where Styles has Aries for the Styles Clash, and while he's holding Aries like upside down, basically Strong just hits that kick right between Aries' legs, right in Styles' face. It looks so great.
And sounds great. They do one of the better thigh slaps we've heard.
Yeah, and one of the better. It's a great way to take AJ. That takes him out of the match. One of a great way to take him out of the match. AJ does a quick delayed vertical suplex and Prazak even says, carrying on the tradition at the 4th anniversary show of the delayed vertical suplex, and then later Roderick does one to AJ. So again, probably 5 or 6 delayed vertical suplexes on the night. Yeah, so overall I would just say, again, like you said, this match in some ways has kind of aged, in terms of pace. But I still think it's a really good kind of action tag main event.
Yeah, I would call this a really good action tag main event. I think one of our bigger disagreements of the night, though, is that you have this match and the Danielson-Rave match on the same level, and I definitely don't think they're on the same level. I think that the Danielson-Rave match was a lot more memorable and just like an overall better match. I mean, this, like you said, just had less of a story, less nuance to it. I mean, it still did have a story in that, like, at the beginning, maybe Aries and Strong weren't taking Seidel quite as seriously because he was kind of like the junior member of the team, and Seidel was trying to show them that he was up to their level. And, they showed AJ a bit more reverence because obviously he's much more established. And, and Seidel was sort of like the one who had to prove himself because he was the least stiff member of the match. He was certainly the least bulky guy in the match. So he was relying more on the flying. So and there were some good hot tags. There was also a not great hot tag to Aries, but, he was energetic and he was able to start the whole, the dive train segment. I do think that the final sequence of this match, I'd say like the last 4 minutes or so, is one of the better action sequences at the end of a tag match we've seen in ROH so far. Like the big moves all just came off really well, and these guys are all so athletic. And, I think, Strong was really starting to show I think Strong was the best guy in this match. And, he's in the ring with AJ Styles and Austin Aries, who are considered, 2 of the better wrestlers of their era. So I think it really, Strong continues to show what an elite level he was getting to at this point. And I also think Seidel showed how good he was. Because, when you mention this is the dumb jock match, I feel like Seidel comes off the least like a dumb jock of any of these guys. And I thought his energy helped the match a little bit, but yeah, there was a lot of just really good action. And I think for such a long match, that's kind of a good thing to have in a tag team main event. The other really good tag title defense that Aries and Strong had was against Danielson and Lethal. And I think I like this one better, but I know you like the other one probably a little bit better. But I think it's close. And already these two guys are elevating the tag titles a lot. These feel like worthy main events. This is the second tag title main event that they've had. And, it feels like they could, definitely the titles feel like they're on that level. And, clearly with the Briscoes angle, they're doing a lot of work to ensure that they stay that way. But yeah, I thought this was 3 3/4 maybe, if I would put it on a level, maybe up to 4. But I do think this was not on the level of the world title match. Just that match felt a little more special to me.
I completely can see that, because also these are very different stylistic matches, right? Completely different kind of matches. One thing you were talking about, I agree about the tag team division, really starting to come into its own, or at least the tag champs. Obviously the division's still not necessarily deep, although we're getting the Briscoes back. But one thing I was just thinking about is, in a weird way for the division, maybe not for the two guys' careers, but the Strong Aries falling out with TNA couldn't have happened at a better time, because it almost gave them, I imagine, more momentum with the Ring of Honor fans. Apparently, I don't think this made DVD, but I read some live report that there was fuck TNA chants, before this match started. And there's a point in this match where there are dueling Austin Aries and AJ Styles chants, and the Aries chants are noticeably louder than the AJ Styles ones. And part of me was wondering, I wonder if that is just kind of a reaction to the crowd is really super appreciative of Aries and Strong, because they know now the news is of course, now it filtered out from the last show about like kind of what they sacrificed to make sure they did that Ring of Honor show. So I imagine, in a sense, that probably gives them a lot of momentum as champions.
Yeah, I feel like that's part of it. Aries was seen as a guy who was more loyal to ROH. Styles was seen as a guy that was more associated with TNA. And yeah, I'm sure the ROH crowd appreciated that.
Yeah. So after the match, we get more confetti. It comes down. The two teams are about to shake hands when the Briscoes run in an attack. They hit Roderick Strong with a spiked J driller before Aries chases them off. Jay says they're getting their belts back. Aries tells them to go back to the chicken farm, motherfuckers. Aries, Styles, and Strong check on Roddy, or I guess Strong doesn't check on Roddy, but the crowd chants Ring of Honor, and an on-screen graphic says, "Thank you for 4 unforgettable years." Next, we get a shot of a dingy building in Philadelphia. I think it's the Murphy Rec Center. I've obviously never been there. The camera pans over, and we see Christopher Daniels standing by. We quickly fade out to a graphic that says "To be continued."
I'm pretty sure it was the Murphy Rec, because if I recall correctly, we'll see. There might be like a thing where he like goes from the Murphy Rec to the ECW arena at the beginning of the next show.
And we do know, obviously, the next show is in Philly, so they would have the ability to shoot him going to the Murphy Rec.
Oh, yeah, and also, by the way, one other thing I forgot to mention in the tag title match that I thought was funny. Gabe does one more cameo on commentary talking about how he's at the party. Like, everyone's celebrating how they beat up CZW and they're all drinking in the back. And I have to say, Gabe does a pretty good acting job of being drunk. Like, he's trying to sound like his speech is slurred and stuff, and like, Prazak's like, "Oh, you're drunk, you're too drunk." And it's like, hey, you know what? It was like not bad. It wasn't over the top. Like, he just sounded a little bit drunk. And I doubt that he actually was. So like, good job. Good acting, Gabe. Good comedic acting.
Didn't he also smoke in like, he always does this too, like he'll do the drunk, but then he'll go like smoking a little too.
Well, he was, yeah, I think there was something like, I think that's not the only thing that you smelled or something like that. Yeah.
Oh God. So yeah, that was the show, and I don't think this is controversial. I think this is widely pretty well considered. Like, this is the best show I think we've seen in quite some time. I think there are 2 great matches. I would say the tag and the Danielson match, and I would say the Colt Homicide match. I can see that not being everyone's jam, because it does go on. It's for a long time, and it is more of a story match. But I do really like the story they were telling.
The ROH CZW angle, I think, was really one of the things that put the show over the top too.
Yeah, I was going to say, you get the 3 close to great or great matches. Then on top of that, you get like the CZW angle, which is really memorable and cool. And then the Briscoes return feels noteworthy. You got a couple wrestlers that are like on their way out of the company. Like, this just felt like an important show where a lot of things happened. Plus, you had the great wrestling. And again, it goes back to this conversation we had at the start of the show. It just, watching this show on this night, it really felt like this is the first show of this streak of shows where it really felt like, oh, this company is reaching a new level of momentum. Like, they're heating up. A lot of things are clicking for them right now. And just even obviously now we have the benefit revisiting these shows. We know what's coming next. We know they got some big things in the chamber too. So it's easy for me to say it's heating up when I know what's coming next. But I think even at the time you could tell, this product is getting that momentum again.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and of course there's going to be setbacks and stuff and shows that don't work as well. But yeah, the show had a hot crowd. It had hot matches. It had good work and good angles. And, obviously that one really scary part with Jack Evans. But overall, this felt like a promotion that was ascendant. And, that's always a lot of fun. And you get the good wrestling on top of it. This is definitely the best show of 2006 so far. And I'm trying to think of when the last show that was as good as this. I guess maybe Final Battle. But, they definitely are building a hot streak in this building in Edison.
Yeah, I always feel like a lot of times we go, oh, this is a great show because there's some great matches, or this is a great show because it just felt really important. Like, this is one of those shows where you can really tell Ring of Honor show is special when, like, you don't have to choose. Like, it's all there.
Yes.
Both elements.
And there's definitely going to be more of that, especially when we get to the Chicago shows, which are not too far away now.
Yeah, so that brings us to the end of the show. If you want to get in contact with us, through the years at gmail.com, ThROH. We have a thread on the Pro Wrestling Only Plugs forum, Twitter at Trevor Dame or at Mayor MGF. Next time on the show, the Milestone Series match just started. It will continue with Arena Warfare. Ring of Honor comes to the ECW arena. We're going to have Danielson versus Alex Shelley, and we're going to have another gigantic CZW Ring of Honor confrontation. And we're going to have another major wrestler showing up late to the show, basically making it on the show by the skin of their teeth. Hopefully it goes better than it did for Jack Evans. So we're in a really exciting time for Ring of Honor right now. And this is just really fun to be. It's one of those moments where it's like, I've been thinking about this era for a long time of doing the podcast. It's cool that we're in it. And it's crazy that we're talking as like Ring of Honor's on the eve of kind of a pay-per-view that quite a few people are excited about. I know Tony Khan has said that he thinks from just the early like pre-sale buys, it's going to be one of the most purchased pay-per-views in Ring of Honor history. So, Matt, Ring of Honor is back.
It is. It's back. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm very curious to compare the two Jay Lethal versus Samoa Joe matches.
Yeah, me too. We might be like two of seven, but
yeah,
maybe a few of the people listening to the show, you will also be interested. I mean, compare and contrast. So until next time, have a good time. Have a great time.